Okay, I'm going live immediately with no intro because I didn't want to take the time to set up an intro because that would eat into the precious amount of time that I would have to talk and maybe talk with others and otherwise present thoughts and ideas. And so I am just saying this because nobody's watching it yet. And um, yeah, but hopefully people will go back and look at things in the after this is done streaming. So it's more interesting to have somebody talk at the beginning, even if it's not really saying anything, than it is to have a boring intro video. And it's been only 1 minute and somebody's already watching, so that's great. So the thing I thought I would talk about real quick, and probably let people come in to talk pretty soon here, but I added this, I put this thing out there on the Substack yesterday, trying to write things quick because I haven't, I've been stuck in like long projects and trying to figure things out. And I saw somebody posted a little message, and Paul kind of liked it, about how the thing you work on for however long, like 4 people see it, and then the thing you take 20 minutes and just throw up there, that's what goes viral. Not that going viral is the goal, but I think that, so there is value in these thoughts that you're just like, yeah, that's an interesting thought. And you just throw it up there. So I'll just read the first paragraph and then I'll kind of talk about it and some of the gist of the thing and some other stuff. So, truth and wisdom are attained in 2 ways. The first is through direct revelation, an opportunity afforded to many but rarely recognized. The second comes through trial and error after refusing the first. The process that begins with parents telling their children not to touch the hot stove continues throughout life as the wisdom to trust gradually overcomes our instincts to rebel. So the basic point of it that I was trying to make is like, okay, there's 2 ways to know something. The first way is that you learn something directly, and if somebody can explain it well enough, or if you trust them, you're going to go along with the advice, and that'll work well for you. And then and sometimes you don't necessarily need to know why something is wise to before you start obeying it. You can start doing it, and then you will gain the knowledge. You can gain knowledge secondhand by observing other people. So maybe your parents tell you to do something responsible, like not touch a hot stove, and you say, okay, I'm not, my curiosity is not desperate to know why I shouldn't touch the hot stove. But then within the course of events, you see somebody else who maybe does disobey, and you see them in pain and their hand is burnt, and then you've just gained you now have the full wisdom of understanding, um, without having to find out for yourself. And I think maybe another way you could look at that is you read a book. You read the Bible and you see this is what somebody does. They God says don't do this. The people do this. Then the bad thing happens. Then God comes in and fixes it, and that happens over and over again in various ways. So, in the one hand, it gives you the idea. Oh, yeah, this is why you shouldn't do things because there's bad consequences. But then realizing that those people didn't have the wisdom to see that right away, they did make a mistake. You also learn, okay, well, God has grace, and there's ways that overcome this. But the reason why I was talking about it is I was just thinking about the kind of projects that go on in these online spaces, and obviously there's a big search for wisdom, or there are people searching for all sorts of answers to all sorts of problems. Sometimes very specific niche problems. And so the one example that I talked about a little bit in my writing was home math. And it's like he starts out doing these things that like are dating advice or dating videos, showing how, and he's really trying to correct women's thinking or whatever. Ideally, that's like the people that you would want to watch his videos so that they would stop making mistakes, but it's mostly men that watch it. And then he talks about, well, what this is why men bungle the situation too. But then as he's gone on in his channel, he starts looking at all these other things. Well, part of the problem is because of the system that we live in, the political stuff, the financial, economic stuff. Part of it is like our education problem, and definitely the cultural system, which is raising young men and young women. And you progress a couple years from when he begins, and he's like has this self max AI thing, which I don't know, maybe it'd be fun to try to do that at some point when I have more disposable income. But just maybe I don't know, maybe if everybody says yes, you should do it, like a lot of people comment that I should do it, maybe I will pay however much it is to try it out and do a video with it. But the point is that focusing on one problem, and it could have even been from maybe it starts with a much more shallow problem. Like a guy's not trying to even get a girlfriend. He's just trying to like sleep with a girl for the first time or something like that. And then as these people try to figure out like, why is this difficult? Why am I having a hard time with this? Their search progresses into all these other connected areas. And what happens is they get a bigger worldview. And a lot of that comes because they're not doing it in isolation. They're interacting with other people. So, as an example, it's like somebody starts a channel on a quest about like dating stuff, and then they find out there's this whole economic component of it. Then they try to find out what is the problem with economics, and then maybe they discover some guy who's been trying to figure out that question more directly, like maybe like a Bitcoin guy or something, and then they can interact. And then and I'm talking about, I don't know, if is this, Mark, are you saying only if they're honest in regard to this search for knowledge? Because that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about people that are generally searching for knowledge from all these other ways. But the interesting thing is that, and so this is another interesting thing. So I watched Robert Breedlove, who does the Bitcoin thing. But then in the Bitcoin thing, it's like he's also talking about, well, that's just the biggest part of the question. I mean, it does contain, answering questions of the whole world. So I sorry, I'm going to answer this text message. So, basically, from whatever starting point, these people are all, finding kind of like your one problem is not isolated. It's connected to a whole way of life. So yeah, so I was talking about the Bitcoin guy, and he got into like, healthy eating and then community and all these things. I wasn't frozen. I was just answering a text message. And so, eventually everybody, maybe they still have their flavor of the channel, but like these channels don't even remain specialized. It's like you can go to any YouTube channel that's like gained a following of something, and it's going to end up becoming covering a much more broader topic over a few years. And they will have engaged in these friendships and relationships with other people online. And even sometimes, it's say, like somebody like Russell Brand, he starts on his whole search looking for wisdom and spirituality and looking at all the problems with the world and conspiracies. And, lo and behold, he kind of stumbles onto Jesus. And I think the interesting thing is that, so a lot of these people have just, they started off with the basic cultural assumption, anything but like, obviously Jesus is false and Christianity. So let's search, every other means and thing to try to figure out like the meaning of life. And so this is where it gets to interesting thing, where I was thinking about um, churches and how so many churches basically present the message of Jesus, which is the critical thing. And it has that element of divine revelation. Like you're not going to figure out precisely Jesus from just rooting around in all these other areas, but they present it as like the answer to a very specific problem, like which is helpful and appealing maybe to people who are like struggling with addiction or something like that, but they fail to recognize the application to all those other areas of life. And so essentially, through trial and error, a lot of these people online that are searching and building platforms and building relationships, they are building a not perfect, but a much more well-rounded worldview of like what is a normal life, a normal good life supposed to be, as opposed to a bad one. And then they are kind of fuzzy sometimes, like make they don't understand, like, so it's not so they won't say, if they don't become a Christian, they maybe will just say like, well, there's this slice in the middle here that's religion, and you have to have something in that religion slot. And they're not so picky about it, but they do realize the importance of that. Whereas the church is essentially saying that slot, the religion slot, is the only slot that matters, and it must be filled with Jesus. And I think that in so doing, they ignore all these other aspects of life, which is why people aren't really coming to church for answers. And the real shame of it is that churches aren't looking, they're not figuring this out or improving as fast because they're so stuck in isolation. Like the thing that gets these people learning fast is that they correct their errors and by talking with others. If you say a bunch of stuff, like there's very few people that have a following online that just everything comes out of their head like a cult leader. You can't do that online because people will go find answers other places, and they will say you're wrong about this because of XYZ, and they'll point them to other channels. And then somebody might be in good faith, look into those things and be like, oh, well, I was wrong about that and I'm correcting my views. Or if they don't, the people will stop watching, they'll go away, their following disappears. And so maybe there's something in that churches could learn just from like interacting with each other, like even within maybe a town or a city, to see like what are the areas where you are figuring things out and where you're not figuring things out, because churches try to do everything all by themselves, and then they do a lot of those things poorly. And it essentially they need to get that wider thing going. So hold on a second. All right. So I put the link there so people want to talk about stuff. But the article that I was sharing is there. And here's Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. About to go to the gym.
That's what you do. What is
Cut
it?
What's that?
I said that's a good thing to do on a Saturday.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I caught a couple past minutes of what you were saying, and multitasking here, kind of trying to pay attention
Yeah. So
as we do.
did it more or less make sense or
Well, I mean, ki- what I was thinking is like, you're talking about interacting online, um, versus just interacting with your church, and that just kind of made me think about stuff I've been observing since I've been back in church, like,
mm,
and also very much being online, which is that, like, recently I had a friend who's a minister. Like, I was telling him about StreamYard, about Paul's channel and stuff. It's like, it's kind of interesting. You should check it out. And it's like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel. I was like,
mm,
dude, you should have live streaming, you know, you should have live streaming and have people just come talk to you. And then, like, he started his YouTube channel. It's him doing like a 30-minute long like introduction to Genesis. And I'm
yeah,
just thinking, like, I don't want to say anything, but it's like, dude, you're there's already like 100 videos like that with thousands of views,
yeah,
like, and then it's like his second video was like the fall is like 30 minutes long. It's like, and it's not like well produced. It's just kind of him talking, and it's great stuff. But the fact is, it's like, dude, there's so much more. Like, I'm gonna watch the Bible Project, which is better produced and more cut down,
yeah.
Um,
So
but
you're
but I
so you don't you're saying you don't think we need more Christian YouTube as a
um yeah, I don't know. I mean, I watch a little bit of it, but I
well,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah,
Well, you know,
it's
it's
got
interesting. So I did notice like yeah, like stuff like that is like way well the things that are getting more popular, you know, because it used to be maybe a lot of like apologetic stuff and there is still a lot of that or like why you shouldn't listen to these people or why this is the best like translation of the Bible or something like that. But then, you know, there's so many
yeah,
guys now where that even if they're more like they're not as like open as PVK, but so many more pastors are doing the like let's talk with somebody from another denomination and like learning more about different denominations of Christianity. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's like some are more, maybe like, well, within Protestants, like we'll learn all the different types of Protestants. There's still a little like sketchy on like you know reaching outside, but the Catholic guys are a lot more open, and you know even like seeing how much people are like talking to like certain Mormon people now and stuff like that. Like, and all that stuff is way more popular than like debates. Like, people don't like the debates so much anymore. It seems like that way. So it seems like the thing is happening, like what I'm talking about, but it's only online or it's like only in the podcasts because the pastors are like, well, we're on a podcast, so I can talk to you like a human being. But if I was, you know, officially representing my church with our like statement of beliefs, then I would have to call you a heretic and say not to listen to you. So it's a little weird in that
huh,
way.
yeah, it is. And if you have your very strict propositions, then you almost have to make those statements of this is why you're wrong, and this is, and but I think that I don't know, I think that, like, the internet discourse is making it possible to where you can still have your beliefs, you can still, have some, like, clear lines drawn, but you still have to, like, you have to engage with people, in like a personable way.
Yeah,
Unless that's your thing. I mean, some people like that. Some people like just being isolated, I've noticed people who are kind of more fundamentalistic, like on Twitter, like really I can tell that like I follow them because I actually agree with some of the stuff they say, but
Yep.
I'm noticing they're really trying to be dialectical and considerate in their, in statements, whereas like before you just like try to trash the people, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So
yeah, it's definitely. I think there's a thing because obviously everybody wants some level of community. Like nobody wants to be all the way isolated, like because then you're just like a crazy person or something, you know. And so, but then when you see people like making demands of basically like, okay, well, I can only be friends with the people who think exactly the same way that I think, you know, like in a fundamentalist sense. And it's not just like, you know, fundamentalist Christians, but like or you know, you could say it's like the very dogmatic approach of, you know, so it could happen in any kind of like spiritual tradition, but it's like if you insist on having everybody agree and have the same thoughts, then you just are reducing the amount of people that you can actually be friends with, you know, exponentially. And and then even then it's hard because then you get like the purity spiral thing where people are like, if a little bit of being hardcore is good, then even more is even better. And then eventually you end up all alone again because you're the only one who can like follow all the rules that you made up perfectly. So yeah, so it's like people have to be more open-minded and stuff about other people's beliefs. And I think, but I think people probably are understanding that more of it is about not is about understanding things different way, or you know, which even just to be the fact that like we're all different people, more so than like in you're understanding it incorrectly or something.
right. And as I heard you say something on a stream like maybe a couple weeks ago that kind of stuck with me actually, which was, you know, going trying to go to a different church after growing up in sort of another tradition that, you know, like beliefs that conflict with each other, instead of saying this is completely right and this is completely wrong, saying like this is like 20% right, you know,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel too. For instance, like I wasn't raised in a like a reformed tradition, like once saved, always saved or whatever. So, but and so I guess that's what I go with. I go that like you could lose your salvation or whatever. But at the same time, it's like reading the Bible, there is a level of determinism going on there that, people in my tradition don't want to talk about, but it's definitely there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's strange that I don't know. It's like it almost doesn't get talked about because they don't want to like slip into Calvinism, you know.
Hmm.
At
Hmm.
the same time, it's like, but Calvin was kind of on to something, you know.
Yeah.
And he may not be completely right about, every bit of theology, but it's like there's the word predestination is in the Bible a bunch of times, and it's like those are called, some people are called, some people aren't going to hear, you know. And so, um, yeah, like just saying there's something to that. And I'm just kind of glad I don't have to be a minister so I can kind of be sort of schizophrenic and all over the place, because like
Yeah.
ministers sort of have this minister way of talking where it's very guarded and they have to watch everything they say and stuff so they won't, mess up. And it's
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to just be sort of a religion nerd without being a minister so I can just like be all over the place,
Yeah.
but still like kind of part of a stricter tradition.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, obviously there's a sort of like comfortability aspect with different traditions or whatever. Like, I mean, I could see like it would be, unfortunately, like Christianity's got so many. So it's like, you know, if for some reason I was just like got to the point where um, I'm like, all of these maybe like say evangelical churches or something. That's kind of like, what I'm most familiar with. If I say like all those churches are the same, I'm going to go to like uh the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church or something like that. And knowing like that it's not um like there's at least some amount of comfortability because it's still like Christian. And so like it would be way harder for me to be like, I'm going to go to the Hindu temple instead. Like that's like it's just too much like foreignness. Um Thank you. But uh um but yeah, so like that's the balance, because like there's something about like going to a new place. Like I almost wonder how like people get really attached to like their new version of like whatever Christianity they like. And maybe they started like researching it online, but if you go to like any different tradition and it's not like the mega church, people, you're going to stick out more as a visitor. And like hopefully if the people don't want their church to die and they're friendly to visitors, like you'll probably actually get more attention and like kindness when you visit. um
Hmm.
so like I wonder how much of it is like it's like a self-referential or experience of uh like you could have had the same, like you could have skipped the online research part and just gone to any small church that's kind to visitors because they don't get them often enough, and you would have thought that that was the greatest church or whatever. But because you people picked their like denomination online first, they just they get um really convinced like it's the propositions and or the liturgy or the whatever, like that the thing that makes this one unique is what makes it good. But like it's actually the thing that's really common about it that makes it good, that it's a, a decent church like in a decent community.
Yeah, it's like close to home and the people are nice. And it's like, wow, it's meant to be.
Yeah, I was thinking about yeah, so when my wife has a baby, usually like last time we took a break from going to our church because she works there, so it's like maternity leave. Um, because we could, it's nice to go and see people and they can see the baby, but like people will just come up to her and ask her a million questions when ever something goes wrong. So it's hard to like not be at work. So we
Hmm.
took the time to like visit some different churches. So I was thinking like there's one CRC church here in San Antonio, but it's a Korean one. And I was like, I don't know, it seems kind of weird, but maybe we'll check it out. Maybe that'll be the thing. Like that'll make the difference or whatever. But like just to like try something different. Um, because even it's funny, like like when Paul always talks about how like people wouldn't go to Living Stones if they moved to Sacramento, like people from the corner. But I watched Living Stones and the Freddie and Paul show, and it's like exactly like the church that my dad was a pastor of. So uh, I would probably be fine there. But it
Yeah.
is that thing, like because it's like it is almost like family. Like families have idiosyncrasies. They're not nobody like worries about like did we did our family have the most correct propositional beliefs on parenting or something like that. It's actually just whatever, they usually always screwed up, but you commit to it and you love them. So I think that's kind of the same thing about like small churches and communities.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. The church that I go to, it's I really love it. I had that initial experience of the welcomeness and certain just certain things that happened. and the beliefs were like okay, they're really good. But then a new minister came in like shortly after I got there, and it's like it's funny, like he's one of in the church I go to, like in the they hate to call themselves a denomination, so whatever you call it.
Hmm.
He's probably one of the most liberal people in that church, like one of the most liberal ministers that can
Hmm.
still be called that part of that church. And I have family who are literally like some of the most conservative. And so it's like just this tension going on. It's that I've been dealing with lately. But it's like, man, I committed to the place. And it's not, and this is liberal for for the Church of Christ. It's not blue. It's
Yeah.
like he gets up there and he like talks about other denominations as if they're Christians, and that's like very liberal in this church, you know, or or because a lot of those churches believe that we're the only ones.
Yeah.
But
Man, that's a tough problem. Because I was thinking too. I mean, even that. So it's interesting because we've had a new pastor at our church. I guess it's probably been close to like 2 years now, basically. Yeah. No, year and a half. I don't know. Um, and it's been a somewhat of an adjustment and stuff. And I wonder even like what degree like the adjust it should be an adjustment process on both sides. Um, and obviously part of the pastor being the pastor is that he's going to have somewhat of a vision or a sense of like where does this community need to go. And uh it probably is harder. I don't know. I don't know what's harder. I like so I'm probably more liberal or center or whatever compared to like a lot of people, even at our church and stuff. Um, but I would way rather go to a more conservative church where the people um, are like maybe a little closed minded or whatever about certain things set in their ways. But they are like genuine and good people, which is like what I find more or less. And I'll just keep my like weirder opinions to myself, more so than the liberal church where it's like, oh, they say where they say they love and accept everybody, but then they don't do anything that's loving or accepting. And especially they don't love people that are conservative and they don't try to understand them at
yeah,
all. Like, because it's like I understand why I understand people that are more conservative than me. And I'm like, yeah, I understand why it's hard. Like, and I understand like what the dangers are of like blurring those lines or stuff like that. Um, but I would way rather be in that place. Um, it's eh, yeah, it's tough. Like that was that. There's a whole bunch of things because of that guy NT Wright. Do you know NT Wright?
yeah. I
Yeah,
recently made everybody mad.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was a bummer though. It
Yeah.
was a bummer.
But it's just funny how it's like the thing is like people don't understand like how much because the thing is that he's not like he's basically you could have guessed that he would have said that like for forever based on all of his other stuff. But it's like, oh, but he's so nice and polite. And then you realize, like, oh, people just like the appearance of being nice and polite more than they care about what's actually right or wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be in that position. I'd rather have the people that are jerks but are consistent in their jerky behavior, like if it's coming from a good place. So Wright was saying like basically, oh, maybe we should be okay with exceptions for abortion if it's all the liberal stuff, like well, like the mental health of the mother, or if it was whatever
Rape
the
or incest,
circumstance, yeah,
and and
yeah,
like if the child is disabled or something, what
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah,
Yeah.
all horrible things. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what he said, and people are right to be upset. So,
Yeah, it sucks because I really like his stuff. You know?
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Even it's funny because I don't know. Maybe that's what maybe my perspective on him. It's like I'm not surprised he said that because when I first read I can't remember. I read one or two of his books. I think that, and I was like coming from a more like fundamentalist background. So to me, he was like the liberal kind of person, but it was like this guy's a liberal, but he really like believes in Jesus. And so it's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, that's interesting. Like, so liberal people can believe in Jesus. That's good. And this is what it looks like. But then, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure he still believes in Jesus. He's just got a huge blind spot about this stuff that is pretty bad. And, so yeah.
yeah. It's like he was kind of small L orthodox in most of the stuff I used to be interested in. I never read any of his books. I just saw a bunch of interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
But pretty orthodox in his basic beliefs. But and I only watched part of the clip in passing. I don't like what I heard him say is that it's complicated, you know. And I mean, I'll admit that much. It is kind of complicated, but at the same time, it's like I don't think I need to say what I will say is that these are like less than 99% of abortion cases. You know,
Hmm.
these
Yeah.
weird exceptions, and it's like it's almost like this little thing that people draw out to that's not really what we're talking about. You know?
That's a good question right
But
there. um, yeah, it's interesting because and Mark's saying obviously nobody's perfect and stuff, and this is I think that part of the thing is like, um, I can understand like, and I think it is good. Like this is the thing that bothers me about like maybe churches that are too conservative is that they don't even want to have discussions about things. Like they'll just say abortion is just bad and wrong always, and I'll be like, yes, it is bad and wrong always, but we should understand why it's more complicated sometimes, and then we should like when it is like those exception cases, and we should understand it. It does, but the problem is that people don't like they don't want to talk about understanding it because they think that if you understand it, you are excusing it. And then like I think that's the problem where it's like somebody like on the other side, like NT Wright wants to say, because I understand it, we do need to excuse it. And it's like, no, that's the whole point of forgiveness. Forgiveness is admitting you did something wrong and you are forgiven for it. It like and the consequence or whatever like that, it, the grace is that you don't get the electric chair or whatever, or maybe you do or something, but like God takes that. God takes the consequence of that, so that we can learn from it. And like that was even the main thing was saying like that's one of the ways, like one of the ways you get wisdom is by doing. Yeah, NT wrong. Um, like,
oh, you got him.
yeah, like that. So like, and that's the thing where it's like, okay, maybe if someone's too conservative, they would want to be like, if you have ever done this, like there's no grace. So our former pastor actually, um, he had he was kind of not he grew up in a Christian home, but he wasn't really living it. And then in college he got his girlfriend pregnant or whatever, and he was begging her to not get an abortion, and he didn't have any control over it. She went through with it, and he was like saying like, I will take this child, my parents will help me raise this child, like please don't kill this child, I know this child is my child, or he would have done whatever, but he didn't have any power over the situation. It's like, and that brought him back into a right relationship with God. And then like there's another woman in our church from that time that kind of had the same story. And many women have that testimony of they didn't fully understand, or they didn't what they were doing. They absolutely understand how wrong it is now, and because of
Right.
that they are like a powerful advocate for good. Like, and so that's the thing. It's even like when somebody makes a mistake, they gain this wisdom that's so valuable, and then they do everything they can to share that wisdom without other people having to make the same mistake.
Well,
So, and that, yeah,
I think that like in conservative churches, a lot of them will be like they do want the people who have made huge mistakes to come and repent and be forgiven. Like they'll say that, and I think they authentically do want that, but a lot of them don't know how to make a space for people who have made those mistakes because most of these people in these churches are like, lifetime people who have known how to be churchy, and they don't know how to let people keep making mistakes for a while until they learn how not to.
yeah.
And it's like with the thing with abortion, it's like, okay, yeah, it's wrong, and but at the same time, it's like, okay, but on the other hand, you have no problem like voting somebody in because they like trolled the person on the other side of the spectrum, and this person is like actively funding and supporting uh, the killing of children all around the world. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's like you can't have one without the other. As long as like we're supporting bombing children in other countries, then we don't really have much moral high ground to talk about abortion, you know? So that's kind of the way I feel about it anyway,
well,
so.
yeah. And it's interesting because this is what I say, like, maybe so I guess in even in my experience, it's like I grew up with a more reformed like theology in my parents' church. Then I worked in a Pentecostal church for a long, long time because I had the opportunity to, and they were not very much. They had a pretty different theology. So then, like, I get on Twitter and I'm like, oh, I want to follow the like reformed people so I can see what interesting things they have to say. And then I realized, like, oh, I had very good experiences with a certain group of reformed people, but then there's also like a whole bunch that are definitely like spiraling in their conservatism. And like there's some people that are so extreme on that thing, like they're basically they're saying like women have to be given the death sentence, like they want, it's like that's what they want a lot. They want to make it totally illegal, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. But then saying like it's totally illegal, and therefore, if a woman gets an abortion, she's committing murder, which is true. But then like the only punishment is like she has to have the death sentence, and it's like, um, that's pretty extreme. Like, I mean, I don't. It's just I don't know. Like what they're wanting is like a worldview in which stuff is like so clearly like uh, cause and effect ordered that
Yeah.
um, they're and they're totally blind to whatever area of that worldview they don't live consistently in, but they're just putting like that's the thing where it's like I don't know, it's like you fight abortion for so long you start to like and yeah they lost sight of like the fact that people can change, so they hate the women that do
Start
it.
to abort yourself.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, obviously, there are women there, and they find them and they put them on TikTok that like are joking about it and stuff. And it's like,
Right.
and you know what? Those people are probably like demonically possessed, or at least they're under the influence of demons. If they are actually getting excited about doing that, like that's bad. But
There's a certain segment of like my wife's old friends that when I hang out with them, I always get really, really nervous because they really are like, oh, did you see John Oliver last Saturday? Oh, yeah. And it's like, I can't believe you're. And one of them actually like they were talking about when Kamala had the abortion clinic on wheels, and she was like, "That is so awesome," and I was just like, "I got to get out of here," you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm not gonna argue or nothing, but and I also don't want, I don't know, I don't want to cause friction with my wife's friends and stuff, but it's just like, yeah, that attitude sickens me. But a lot of these women that get them, I mean, it's like it's when you have the science community and the authorities telling you it's okay, it's nothing wrong, it's like it's not a person. You'll be able to have a more full life, and all these things. And so they're able, it's like forgive them, they know not what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
Dan's
it's
saying
it's
here,
almost it's almost the same as like if somebody goes into war because they're proud of their nation, and then they later find out that the war was a bunch of BS. You know, it's kind of the same thing. You know, like just think of how many children were killed in Vietnam, and it's like that's really doubtful if that was necessary at all.
yeah,
So, and we don't punish the veterans. Well, some of them got punished by the culture, but anyway, Michael, have a good day, man. I'm out of here.
all right, have a good one, enjoy the gym. So I'll just say what Jan was saying here. Yeah, like online psyops and stuff, it is definitely true. So this is an interesting thing though, because like, so the change, and I noticed this a long time ago. At a certain point, like way before Roe got repealed, I realized like, oh, right wing politicians use pro life as like this gotcha thing to get conservative Christians to vote for them, and they value that, and they do not actually want that to go away, because then they can't use it anymore. And now that things, now that Roe was appealed, it's very much come out that that's the case, not only for those politicians but for a lot of pro-life organizations or whatever, that they were advocating for this incrementalist approach, like basically be like, we'll never be able to change that law, but we have 50 years of jobs and funding ahead of us if we can push for people to make a bunch of little symbolic laws and get up there and hold the Bible up in state houses and Congress and stuff. And it's like, yep, that was actually really, those people were actually really phony. So then there is like a big movement that's like this abortion abolitionist movement, which is basically just wanting it to be illegal. But I think within those people, there's some people who are really extreme, or the people are just saying the logical thing of like, oh yeah, well, if a woman has an abortion, she should be tried, like she's committed a crime, she should be tried, and like she has killed somebody, so is that murder? That's murder or whatever, manslaughter or something. And maybe they have the idea that like, oh, if a woman is put through a murder trial and then is let off the hook, like then she'll understand like the grace of God. But it's just it's just a murky thing. And kind of going back to my original post, like, so this is sort of the problem. Like the church will pinpoint something in the culture and be like, that is bad, and they'll just focus on that. And why? Because the Bible says so. And it's like, okay, but why should we believe the Bible? Because it's the word of God. And then, but then when you look at the whole life um, that's being offered, it's such a thin slip. Like the gospel or Christianity affects such a thin sliver of people's lives as it's in the church, and the church doesn't have answers for these other things. Whereas people now making these mistakes, working through them, like the hookup culture and stuff. So even so, in my post here, I said something about okay, so let's see. Um, so recently, listened to a podcast featuring Homath, a dating influencer who grew his channel. by critiquing complaint videos made by women about men. He was being hosted on a psychology podcast dedicated to the exploration and implementation of attachment theory. In the course of the conversation, they talked about economics, religion, and career paths, how young men can benefit by achieving competence in any domain, while touching on global politics and citing examples from Shakespeare and the Bible. He has transcended the advice to get in shape and make money to hook up, recognizing that health and wealth are meant to serve a higher purpose in a man's life than instant gratification. He even suggests men should resist opportunities for casual sex with women because the cumulative effect on women's attitudes toward men makes it harder for both sexes to pursue marriage and family. So, in a sense, by like making all the dumb mistakes of everybody who says like I don't want to like like 50 years ago whatever, people said church is just about rules, we don't need that, and then everybody's like yeah, we can break all the rules, and then in the meantime everybody has gone and broken those rules and then found out like why all of the Chesterton's fences existed all over the place, and they've reconstructed this much better worldview that is fuzzy, but in some ways it's like way more complete. And so like the thing that's going to make abortions less common is the fact that through all this stuff eventually more and more people are discovering like marriage and family are very valuable things, and in some sense the good thing is that they're going to have a much greater appreciation for marriage and family than the people who um, kind of uh, just were going along with it because it was the culturally normal thing. Okay, so basically, who broke which rules? You know, the sexual revolution, the boomers in the '60s, all that. Get rid of all the taboos. Well, now we've lived with the consequences for a long time on many of those issues, and many people are beginning to discover that there is a certain way that people are more or less meant to live, and it's not rooted in evolutionary psychology, or if it is, it's like, oh, just because we can be like polygamous doesn't mean it's actually good for us, and if we want to live with other humans without war, like in peaceful communities, we need to uh, have some reason to resist these urges, and maybe we have to like construct something, like it's not just going to come from nature, but it's something that takes the shape of like religion. And so essentially they are just recreating a more Christian worldview through trial and error. So yeah. So, and I think that all this stuff, like these trans things and the maid stuff, like we are so far at the ends of these slippery slopes. Like we are literally at the bottom, and there is, and and basically the amount of wisdom you have determines how far you need to look down a path before you recognize that it's a dead end and turn around. And so there are unfortunately probably some people that need to go all the way to the bottom and fully screw up their life, but for every one of those people, um and even then when they do turn around, just think about like how much of an example does like one detransitioner have compared to one individual like person that's still advocating for trans stuff. Like when you stack up the arguments, the person like that's advocating for it is like it's being nice, it's being accepting, and the other person saying like I was lied to, I was robbed of my identity, and my body was mutilated, and I'll never be able to have a normal life, or I'll never be able to nurse children or something like that. And so it's like those people went as far as you could go, and then they turn around and are telling everybody like don't go down this way. And so like they are increasing wisdom. So like wisdom increases through trial and error and all this stuff. Uh, okay. Well, not a deep thinker apparently. I think so. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think the church probably needs to think more about this stuff. So I'm gonna actually. So this is the weirdest sign of the times in which we live. So my father-in-law came to visit uh, this past week, and he um, more or less said that like when he was grown, when my wife and her brother were kids and they were growing up, he did not do a very good job of being like a Christian father, even though like they took him to church and stuff, but he didn't really set a great example. And then him and my wife's uh, mom and dad divorced, and her mom passed away a little bit before we started dating. And when that happened, it really affected her dad, who was already remarried at that point. And he basically like rededicated his life to Christ and became way more like on fire. And so that's been about 10 years now. Um, 10, 11 years, and it's based, it really just only increased. And so he's got a lot of like zeal for sharing the gospel and all these things and stuff. But some of that is that he's kind of like he comes and visits the kids, and he's not around little kids all the time. He lives far away. So and he gets uh he gets really frustrated with like them being kids and their poor behavior or whatever, and he's trying to like he's trying to be like lay down the law or something. And first of all, so all of our kids are probably on the spectrum to some degree or another, very smart enough to notice and acknowledge the inconsistencies in my behavior and my wife's behavior, which makes it confusing when you just try to say I am the authority, blah blah blah. So I ended up sharing this article that Ayla wrote, the prostitute, about her like experience growing up with a super fundamentalist apologetics guy for a father, and how they did like went super hardcore into this growing kids God's way um, parenting like program. And I'm like, this is just a weird world that we live in, where I'm saying, listen to the wisdom of this prostitute on the experience of smart children exposed to this certain line of thinking. And we ended up having a pretty good conversation about it and stuff. And I shared, I had some similar talks with my own dad a few years ago, and he was kind of getting the same way. And just, it's like this is the kind of stuff that like the church worries about, because it gets so worried about reputation. So it's like, if you're a Christian, you represent Christ, your kids have to be super well behaved. And it's like, who are you doing that for? um, and are you really because it's like, yeah, you can discipline any kid into obedience if you do it at the cost of like breaking their will. But then they are not going to view but if that's what they come to associate with Christianity, they're not going to look favorably on that. So it's like the attempt to try to like make sort of super Christian kids through like intense discipline programs really backfires a lot of the time. um, and so there's a lot of wisdom that I've gotten from outside of the church that I think very much resonates with the truth of the Bible, but the church is not very comfortable exploring it because it maybe goes against conventional wisdom or the way things are done or things like that. And obviously different churches have different level of openness with that. But I think that the point I wanted to make was that some of that stuff, um, that wrestling with things is such a powerful tool for shaping your worldview and for gaining wisdom. And um, we ought to embrace that opportunity more. Let's see. I paste the link again if anybody else is willing to come in. Otherwise, it's been about an hour. So there's no air conditioning in my garage, and it is Texas, so it's only gonna get hotter from here. Yeah, and see, this is the thing. It's like I like. Oh, I don't have it on hand. There's a great book of like the reformational worldview, um, called Creation Regained, and uh, Phoebus shared it with me, and it just really does such a great job of summing up a bunch of stuff that I already knew. But it's like, the Bible is not. I think you even said it. I wonder if I said it somewhere in this article. The Bible is not like this comprehensive rule list, even though that's like what people think. Um, it's a. I don't know what I said in here. It's like more of principles or whatever. Or it speaks in relation to everything that is true about life, but it doesn't give you like the comprehensive, exclusive thing about it. So the thing is that if you read it and understand it correctly, um, you should realize that you will find truth um, in many other places. And I use the example of uh, like so like studying professional wrestling. Like there's so much stuff you can relate to professional wrestling, um, that relates to the truth of the Bible. But also, like anything that somebody studies deeply, whether it's like a thing like woodworking or baking, or something that you're interested in studying, like physics or finances, or even like this dating stuff. Like if you are applying like the trial and error kind of scientific method um, of it, and you don't have some once you stop putting some stupid thing at the bottom of your hierarchy, like um, uh, eliminating suffering is the greatest good. Like that's kind of stupid. But let me see. But if you uh, how do I do that? Anyway, but once you don't have that, yeah, Mark's got to go on. If you can make a good cup of tea, you can do anything. And that's the thing. It's like anything you learn about, you're going to learn wisdom from the mistakes, and you're going to learn um, truths that are real truth and are eternal. And any truth that is real truth and is eternal is in some ways connected to the truth of the Bible. And it gives you like a holistic view of the world. And so basically, that was the point I was trying to make in the article. I'll put the link in the description after this thing when I can edit it. I probably could do it now, but I don't know how to do that. And I guess I can share the link in the chat since it's my deal. But like people are figuring out a good worldview, and Christians are just kind of out of the game in a lot of ways. Like we need to get in on the action. So this is the link if you want to read it. Because it's so easy, because basically like people are discovering things that are true and that they're excited about and that are actually answering the questions they have. And we ought to be like, oh yes, let me tell you about something that speaks on that as well. It's the Bible, and it also has other answers to other things. And people should be interested in having those kind of people in your community. So that's So that's the gist of the thing, and the numbers are going down. So people have heard what I have to say. I guess I'll put the links here for if anybody else wants to come in. If not, I'll probably wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. So let me see if I can read that last part. I'll read my concluding thoughts from the thing. Okay. The selfishness and the sexual, I guess it was supposed to be of the sexual revolution, is being overturned by a revolution in responsibility. There are two critical lessons I think churches should learn from the influencer culture. The first is to recognize how desperate young people are for wisdom and work to understand. Hello, Mark. Um, I'll just finish reading it. Work to understand how the transparency of the influencer model establishes trust. Instead of focusing on whatever issue these learners are getting wrong, churches should highlight and affirm what they get right, while presenting biblical wisdom as something that surpasses and enhances the wisdom of online influencers. The second lesson comes from recognizing the value of the interactions that occur between various influencers and their audiences. This has already begun to happen in the Christian podcast space, where good faith dialogues between different denominations and traditions have surged in popularity over polemic, apologetics, and debates. Churches on the ground remain a bit more reticent to engage with their neighbors for fear of losing members, but with each church attempting to do it all, they remain stuck in the past. Yeah, that's a good part there. Mark, you've covered the screen to protect us from obscenities of some kind, or
something like that.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm exhausted. I've been cooking all day. All good stuff. Good exhausted. You know when you're tired from doing good work? I'm feeling like that.
Because what time is it there now?
9:45.
Okay.
PM.
Yeah.
So it's beer o'clock.
Beer o'clock. That sounds good.
Just finishing a cigarette, and then I'll cut up potatoes and make some French fries for the wee ones.
Nice.
So I'm trying to get off camera, but
yeah. What's the daily schedule there in Georgia? Because I know, like, they got all sorts of weird ones out in Europe, like Spain. They're up half the night, and
they have their, what do they call it? Like 3-hour rest at lunchtime.
Yeah, the siesta.
Siesta, that's the one.
Yeah.
The Georgian schedule is they don't have a schedule.
Yeah.
There's no wrong time to eat. There's no wrong time to sleep. There's no wrong time to drink. There's no wrong time to celebrate. It gets pretty hot in the summer, so people don't tend to do much, except maybe if they've got a family village, they'll go there and just chill out for a few months. Saints' days there's a lot of them, and they're celebrated.
Yeah.
It's quite a religious culture, Orthodox, obviously. I don't know.
Do you ever meet up with Bern, or do you see him, Bern Power?
I've met him once or twice.
Yeah.
And I've reached out to him a couple of times, but he doesn't seem very interested in me, so I'm not going to push it.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've had a few good talks with him, so yeah. He was actually the first guy. So it was him, his conversations with Paul that I first stumbled into this, because he went to he knew Francis Schaeffer up there in L'Abri, and I had been reading Francis Schaeffer, and then I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and I thought, man, if Peterson would read some of the things Francis Schaeffer had to say, because he talks about a lot of the same philosophers and things, and I thought, like, that would be a really good connection. So I searched in YouTube, Jordan Peterson, Francis Schaeffer, and that brought up the conversation between Paul and Bern. And
that's so random.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, but that, that's a really good way. I've said that before. It's like if you think about two things that are like disconnected, two people or something like that, and you search it, then you know, if there's not a lot of crossover, you're going to find something that's very particular. And so, yeah.
And you come back to BVK. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I watched most of Burns' stuff first because he had less videos on his channel.
I think he's got a lot now.
He does have a lot, but still, you know, he still, you know, is much more slower paced in putting them out than Paul, you know. And so, and then I figured out, like, okay, you can't. And then once I realized Paul was putting stuff out every day, I'm like, okay, I'll just start watching from now. I'm not going to worry about all the past stuff. And I think that's probably, like, you know, the only way you can really do with his.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bun lives about 10 minutes from me. 10 minutes walk.
Okay.
So we're pretty close. And CW Weeks asked us to do a chat together. So we did that in the local park, which is on his channel.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so, you know, we've had a chat.
Yeah. So is there, do a lot of people speak English there, or? I know, are you learning learning the language pretty well, or do you speak Georgian?
I can speak what I call good enough to talk with a shopkeeper.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the level of my Georgian. But if it's deep conversations, I get lost very quickly.
Yeah.
The elder generation speak Georgian and Russian because they grew up under the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And the younger generation tend to speak Georgian and English. And often some of them speak a few other languages.
Yeah.
They're quite educated and they're quite intelligent. It's quite awesome. I enjoy it here.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind checking it out sometime. We'll see.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a little tough to figure out trips like that with kids and stuff, but maybe when they're a bit older or something, maybe my wife and I can go on on an anniversary trip or something. I'll try to convince her. We went to Paris and Rome for our honeymoon. And you know, so she's kind of like wants to recreate it. I'm like, well, yeah, we can recreate it, but or let's go to Europe, but let's see some other parts of, see some stuff we haven't seen before.
If you come to Georgia, you probably won't get a direct flight, but you might be able to go via Turkey or Greece, and then you can do a few days stop over there and go to see the Hagia Sophia or something in Greece or whatever you fancy. So you can really make the trip work.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, let's see. We just had our 10th anniversary, so
congratulations.
Thank you. So I have 10 years to prepare. 9 years. We're coming up on 11 now. It was a while ago, but it was August. Yeah, August will be 11. So
can I ask?
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time I've grown a full beard, and do you have any advice? Beard tips for men?
Not really. I do it so I don't have to deal with shaving. I mean, it's just the lack of maintenance. Well, that and the other thing is that, for a while, I used to work at a school as a teacher, and I shaved every day. And I got into the not the straight razor, but using some of the vintage shaving, the straight blade one, and like the brush and the different soaps and like all that stuff, and tried to do it up all good. And I did it for like a year. Nothing happens. Grow a beard, get compliments all the time. So I'm like, what's the point? What's the point in all that effort if no one's gonna,
I did. They call them cutthroats in England, and I got one, but I couldn't figure out how to sharpen it.
Yeah.
But
no, I didn't.
You're a woodworker, so you're probably pretty good with sharpening.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I don't know if those ones are a single bevel. Most woodworking tools are a single bevel, which is really a lot easier to sharpen because you just got the back's flat. So, but yeah. So I didn't do that straight razor, but it's like the old safety razor with like the double-sided blade. It's like my dad used to use those.
Favorite.
Yeah, and my grandfather too. So that was like it was vintage enough to be nostalgic to me. But the other one is just, about being I don't know, a snob or whatever, like, because it's so yeah. I'm not a pure in all things. I'm not a purist. So I guess that's why I always get a little bit. I'm always on the other side with those one true
Is this
religion
knocking
debates.
sound coming out too loud?
That's not too bad, I don't think. Yeah. Let's see. Matt was asking about Chicago. As of right now, I don't think so. I have recorded, my promotional team has recorded some content about possibly reaching out to see if this is something people would be interested in supporting. If there was financial assistance, if the crowds demand it, we'll see. But, it'd actually be really expensive because I got to bring San Antonio Sartori and the author and the Onto man. I don't think that the Autistic Warrior should go. He's not really, doesn't do really well in crowds. But, those three guys and then like the quadruple H and then myself, that's like 5 people. So I need 5, 5 admissions plus airfare and hotel and stuff. So it would be pretty expensive for the whole gang to come. But
and there's quite a few in this little corner who are looking for financial assistance to get there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I've tried to help a few of them, but I'm limited, so everyone else is limited to some extent. So if too many people ask for help, it just gets impossible.
Yeah. The one thing I could do is, because I have the books, so if people are interested in buying books and I order them, I can get them cheaper from Amazon. So if people want books, you can order for $25 off Amazon. I pay like 11 when I order them. So then, if you can wait for it, give me the $25. I'll, make a little bit and give it to you signed or whatever. So I might see if people are interested.
Or maybe meet people halfway.
Yeah. $20, a little cheaper. But
because I know you've written a book.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it. I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
Apart from, I think Paul said it's 800 pages. Can you just give us the essence of what you're questioning, or the sense of? Let's start with what it's called. That would be good stuff.
Yeah. So it's called. I think I have a copy here somewhere. Okay. Tents Before Temples. Rough drafts on building a culture that lasts. It's supposed to be lasts, and then somehow in fidgeting with the file for the cover, the last S disappeared. I don't know why. So it is a rough draft in every sense of the word, kind of. And it's like 7 books in one, basically, or something like that. Because it's got. I started writing kind of like essays that were too long to just be an essay, but too short to be a book in and of themselves, and kind of strung them together and covered a whole bunch of things. So the first part of it is kind of dealing with a very rough look at this kind of symbolic messaging, and definitely a lot of things in the that we talk about in the corner. That's kind of a lot in the first part.
Sorry, was the foreigner, did you say?
The corner, the little corner. Yeah, a lot of the things, agents and arenas, and some symbolism, and what are the other things? Like spirits, and like God talk about like school spirit and looking at the gods and kind of trying to make it. Basically, it's me hearing all this stuff, and then I say I'm going to try to make sense of this because when I write, that's how I make sense. So if I write it out and I put it in my own words and it looks and I read it back and it makes sense, then I feel that I've understood it, or at least personally. So it's my own personal understanding of a lot of this stuff, but I think it helps.
So could I say it's something like your journey through this soup? Maybe not soup, but there's all this stuff and all this information coming at us, and it's your journey trying to work your way through it all.
Yeah. And mine starts from like, it's kind of like the reverse of a lot of other people's, I guess you could say, in that I grew up in the church and I've always loved Jesus, and always, through personal experience, good experience with my family, mostly good experience with the churches I grew up in. And then over time, like getting a little tastes of like the struggles and the problems and the questions that other people are wrestling with, always from within that place. Like, so it's like, I feel it's like Jesus is my anchor, and that anchor allows me to explore all these other things, these chasms that other people have fallen into or whatever. And so then I a lot of it was things I learned specifically more for the book, because I was realizing like, like economics was one. It's like, this affects people's life in a big way, and they never talk about it in church. I need to learn something about it. And so, then I would learn some basic stuff, and then I would kind of follow some rabbit trails, where they would go, and then try to connect everything to the Bible in some sense.
That's what I was going to ask. You take all these ideas and you try and root them back into your root, which is Christ and the Bible, and so you're bringing relationship to all these things in a similar way to Jordan Peterson does. Same idea but different.
So and so what I would say is, and maybe this is my it's the combination of ADD and autism makes me a little bit of a generalist in a good way, because I'll go on a deep dive, but I can't. But my attention doesn't stay there as long as the fully autistic person that can just focus for forever. So maybe I get 75% of the way down the rabbit trail, and then I'm bored and I want to move on to something else. But I mean that I feel like it's a good thing, because it's like, I definitely know more than the average person that hasn't looked into these things at all, but I'm not an expert on any of them. But I feel like that's an important, maybe. So my thought is, this could be an important thing for people that are beginning to see the importance of some of these topics, and really a way to show them how they can explore their own understanding of it, without worrying about like, I'm not an expert, or how can I learn, how can I, so it's, on one hand, it's my own exploration of all these things, but it's also meant to be an encouragement for other people to explore things that they are maybe curious about, maybe that they feel are important, but they get overwhelmed by, and maybe a defense of the way that probably most people learn things now, which is not going to college and getting a degree on a subject, but people are going to go online, and they're going to go on YouTube, and they're going to listen to a bunch of lectures, and maybe they might pick up a book or two if that's more of a an introduction to something, or something specific. But it's like, and that's just, people are busy, and we don't have time to all become professors in every topic. But I think that you can learn the gist about something that way, or at least we better hope that, I mean, that's what people are going to do regardless, so so it basically, but I am defending people's ability to like learn things on their own, which I think the expertise kind of culture can intimidate people from not even trying to learn a lot of stuff.
I also think the expertise culture is dying.
Yes. I agree.
And I think it's a well-earned death. But before I get there, you dropped a couple of things on me that I'm like, I got a theory about that. I got a theory about pretty much everything. I'm not saying it's right, it's just a theory.
Yeah.
One of my theories is everyone has a superpower, at least one. And with every superpower, there's a downside. I say superpower in the kind of comic book idea of superpower, but you were hinting at your superpower is you can really focus on something up to a point, and you see the weakness of that superpower in that you never go all the way, but you go a lot further than most people. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's one of your superpowers, which has a weakness. I have different superpowers. Everyone has different superpowers, but everyone has superpowers. You just got to figure out what they are. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. Where were we? I lost my thread.
Well, you were telling me that you had a lot of theories. Okay, yeah. I was saying it takes near as long to get good as a skill as to judge other skill level. Oh, and this is a good one too. So obviously, really, actually knowing things and skills, that's that like tacit knowledge that gives people a sort of different sort of expertise, like where they can, in some sense, maybe they can't articulate what they know as well, but oftentimes they can tell the person who's just studied a lot, that person doesn't understand. They have the wrong idea. And I think that in skills too, like there's definitely, so like I would say woodworking.
Sharpening a blade, use that as an example.
Yeah. And so, and in many of those things too, my skills are very much, I would say, is similar in that I'm a lot better than the average person, but I'm not an expert. I know there are people, and in some sense, like, because there's always that kind of law, that diminishing return or whatever, or I don't know what it is, but it's like it takes you can get to 75% proficiency really fast, and then it takes a lot longer to get to 85, and even longer to 95, and you never get it takes your whole life to get to 100 or whatever.
You never get to 100.
Yeah, you never get to 100. But seeing that and understanding that, and then like woodwork is one thing. I'm pretty good at the guitar, electric guitar, and that really helps me then when I like play drums and I know only a little bit, and it's like, oh, I understand, like I only know a little bit. I've only learned the basics, but I've learned like what the basics are that you have to master. I can't put in the time to mastering it, but now I can tell the difference between like what it takes to be really good at that, even though I can't do it, because I can relate it to my experience on another instrument. So it's like there's a lot of value in if you can connect the thing that you are really good at to things that you are okay at or not. No, yeah, you can quickly get it. Well, with musical instruments, that's the thing. It's like I always, when I hear whenever I hear a new instrument played in like a way that really catches my attention, I really want to buy one. And I don't always have the discipline to really master it. Yeah, but even figuring it out a little bit helps me to understand it and appreciate it much more. So like getting my hands on it, and so it's like, I went to a concert a couple years ago, and they had a couple guys playing the hammered dulcimer, and it was just like, wow, that's like beautiful sounding. It was amazing. I really want to get one. I don't have any money for one now, but but like understanding that a little bit and stuff, it's like I can appreciate it more. But so, yeah.
Do you know what the hardest thing in music for me to understand was?
What?
Rhythm. And the reason it took me so long is because I didn't know that I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I was just completely blind to it. And these last few years, I kind of I can kind of. A long time ago, someone said to me, "Rhythm comes from the body," and I understood it theoretically, but I couldn't put it into practice. And it's only been very recently that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm digging it,
Yeah,
grooving.
that's
It took me so long.
well, I don't know, and I'm glad you figured it out or whatever. I think that's one where it's like, I think I had that. I think I always had pretty good rhythm, and even but because I understood that more intuitively. So it was actually I played in a band for a while that was like really complex metal, like with all this kind of like mathematical rhythms that they were coming up
Calculated.
with. Yeah, and everybody else was like counting
Maths
it and
rock.
figuring it. Like the guy that was writing it, like he was an engineer, and so he thought this was fun or whatever. And so he was writing it like to be interesting to him in a way, and then he would try to explain it to us, basically like knowing it's like these are the counts and then the rest and then it changes and blah, and he could like write it or read it off a page, and I was like, I can't figure this out, I don't know how to do that. But I would just basically be there in the practice playing with them. I never tried to think about it, but eventually I got it through feeling it. And so it's like, oh,
Is it feeling or physical sensing?
well, I mean, it's
Because
both. Like,
we confuse these two words. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, well,
we use them interchangeably.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to do it, and I could tell I'm not doing it right, and so then it's a feedback cycle between what I'm doing and my movements and what they're doing and hearing it, and like I always like a lot of times it's probably not a great habit, but I'll like keep time with my teeth, like I'll just kind of chomp like a little bit. I don't know.
If you're having to manually plane some wood, do you find a natural rhythm to that?
Probably, yeah. I don't do it enough
interesting.
to make it
Because
habitual.
it's too slow.
Yeah.
I've seen some planes on your walls, so
Yeah. Well, I really like, so I most of the time I use them. I'll go buy lumber from whatever, like construction lumber, and then I use the planes to reverse it back into looking more like the old rough hewn stuff. So that's the way that I get the if you use one with a curved blade, you use a plane with a curved blade. That's what they used to use to remove a lot of material. So like if it was really warped and had lots of high spots and low spots, that would get those high spots gone real quick. But if you start with a flat board, you don't have to do so much. I mean, well, a lot of lumber you buy at the construction center still has high spots and low spots too. But basically, basically flat, and then instead I would go over the whole thing with that kind of with those scooped out marks, and I'd go at one angle, and then I'd flip the board around and go with the other one. So they would crisscross. It's kind of like like those waffle French fries, basically. I don't know if you ever had those, but
those ones.
Yeah.
The crinkle cut, I think they called them in England.
I used to have a board actually. Oh, I have a board under a big pile of books. I don't move it now, but yeah. So I would use those, but it does, yeah. And I mean, and that is even the thing where it's kind of like, oh man, I can experience, like, I know what it would be like to have to only be able to do that by hand with those hand planes. Like I'm not, and that's another one of those things where it's like I'm not going all the way, because there's some people that build, they're really into building like furniture only with hand tools. I'm
like that, but that's because I don't like the noise.
Yes, well, that's why I did like doing it too. So when there was there's certain jobs, certain steps where it was basically, cutting a board, ripping it lengthwise or cutting it to length is much faster with a power tool. But when it came to
I'm
any
still
of the
listening.
things
Gonna
like,
wash my hands.
yeah, when it came to fitting the joints and all those things, I do much more enjoy using the hand tools. So I would use a combination of both, and I did like how it was much quieter and more enjoyable. But yeah, but you can see it's a lot of work if you have to do everything that way. Those more basic tasks, man, it's a lot of work and a lot of effort to go from a log to boards or something. Is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what I found when I haven't done it for a while now, but I'm sure it's going to be in my retirement. When I was making joints and watching YouTube videos of how to do it manually, I found it very enjoyable. It wasn't that difficult, but it's an amateur hobby and not a profession. And when it's a profession, it's really about time. So I think that's the difference. I can say, oh yeah, all hand tools, that's fantastic, but it's not my job. It's just a hobby.
Yeah.
So I can get away with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some things like if I was building boxes or like drawers, if I was going to do dovetails, I would only do them by hand. But if I'm not going to do them by hand, I'm also not going to do dovetails. So like, because there's not, yeah. Because there is the and I don't know, maybe, and that's kind of part of that. I talk about that a little bit in my preference. It's kind of like my whole thing with the book is that like
sorry, preference or preface?
In the preface of my book, I explain why it's a rough
Hold it up
draft.
again.
Yeah, so I explain why the book is a rough draft because, and I think I'm pretty sure I just used the woodworking example. So if you look like at a fine woodworking magazine from like the 70s or something like that, or earlier, the things that people were making, what was prized as quality was uniformity, completely flat, completely smooth, consistent widths, and all these things. And so you look at some of these things now and they just look like stuff you get at IKEA, because when everything was done by hand, that it was that level of precision and consistency that was the highest value, because it's the most difficult for a person to do by hand. But machines are so good at it that we don't even look at it as a valuable. No one ever marvels at how flat their coffee table is that they bought from IKEA. Like, if it's not flat, they take it back to the store. So it's changed but now we do see, and this is kind of like, there was this whole resurgence in this kind of DIY stuff, is that everybody wanted the things that were the worn look or shabby chic and these kind of things. And what you want to see is you want to see the tool marks, you want to see the evidence of human hands touching the things. And so my idea was that maybe in a sense, even in writing a book, if I could leave the tool marks present as much as possible, that might be encouraging in some people. I mean, I really do think like that's one of the things I liked about Paul's videos, and he says it's just because he's lazy that he doesn't edit it. But
I think it's a style.
Yeah, well, and I said,
Michael, sorry, I need to cook the children some food now. I've
okay.
got to go.
Okay.
I'll still be listening, but I'll be frying and stuff. So.
Well, if you do, I probably
really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah. Yes, me too. Yeah, but that's why I got on, because he made it look, hey, if he's doing it like that, then I can do it too. So the roughness is an invitation for other people to follow us. So
warts and all, as we say in England.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, it was a great.
I'm still listening. I'm still here.
No, I'm gonna leave because I'll give it a minute. If anybody else wants to come, I'll send the link one more time. Check out the comments because it's getting sweaty in here. Almighty Om has been saying things. Takes really songs to get its skills, skillable. Yeah. That's true. Once you figure something out, it was worth it to have obsessed over it. Much of the rare skills are harder to find and teach. It must be practiced until it becomes second nature. Yes. Yes, Sherlock Holmes and his violin. That's what I found. Even if I wasn't right now, here's Al. Okay, cool. Hello, Al. How are you?
There you go. I was getting the double feed. Yeah, I'm not going to leave you sit, bud. Plus, I'd love to hear more about your book.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so I was just catching up on your comments. So Shakespeare at the violin. So that is like the thing with woodworking, because I worked at a church, and then I started. They had a thrift store that they started, and I was working there. And
Same up the road.
Yeah, and I started repairing things and then modifying things.
That's even better. Yeah, they don't do that. I wish they did.
Well, so I got after a while. I ended up getting to do that full time, basically, for them, and
it's like so much better than just selling something, eh? You're like giving it a new life.
Yeah, and that was probably kind of when I first started, realizing like the connectedness that was providing, because then I would be listening to things while I'm working, and my mind is going off, and so now I do so I was more involved in ministry then, but so it was like that would be the time when I could do my prep mentally, at least, for like writing.
Yeah, and that's what Sherlock Holmes did, and Nietzsche, they would, and Hemingway, they would let that stuff sit in the back, and you were still working on it, right? Is that what you mean? Like you're working with your hands, but in the background, deep down inside, still working on your speech, your material, whatever you want to call it.
So that's what I realized. Even now, I'm making my money full time work, doing cabinetry work, and part time do a little bit at church, and obviously do the videos and things like that. But I realized at some point it's like, okay, well, even if I got hired full time, like if I took a job full time as a pastor or something, I'm still going to need to do my sermon prep in the garage at the workbench.
Or you could be like making stuff for the church. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Which is, a lot of the things
I think that would make you so much more approachable and real. Like people coming to church, I find it weird. What does a preacher do the rest of the week? But if you could literally show them like, hey, I work with my hands and I make this, you'd be more, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? You'd resonate more to more people. Relatable.
Yeah. Well, and that was a big part of before I wrote the whole book, I had the idea for that, because I didn't go to college, and I did go to a Bible college for a while. I didn't go to a seminary, but I did that after I went to one of these like ministry training programs at a big mega church, and it was like,
what is it, like a summer camp or something?
It was a 9-month thing, so it was like an internship, basically, and you're supposed to like learn all the hands-on stuff of doing like ministry, which really, and it was supposed to be about discipleship, So they kind of had this idea that you could go, like a person could go for 1 year, and it would be like a gap year program. It's like get your relationship with God in the right place, and then go off and do whatever you want.
Like
and
college,
then
Peace Corps or something.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to do 2 years, the second year was about like leadership or something, and then if you did 3, the third year was like this, you want to do professional ministry, basically. And they actually had that within this was in the Assemblies of God, and they're pretty low church, and so they actually, you could get your credentials with the denomination for doing that 3-year program.
That's it.
I went for 2 years there, and then I went and did a third year at another church later on. And then I went to Bible college for a while, but it was supposed to be like you're learning the practical stuff, which was really just the practical stuff about
running the church.
Putting on the show or whatever, and then there was supposed to be this discipleship element, and it was supposed to be like, okay, the second year students are going to spend time with the first year students, and then the third year students are going to spend time with the second year students, and then the staff really focused on the third year
Mentorship
students.
built into
yeah.
the school, you mean, eh?
Yeah, but it didn't work at all.
What was missing?
At least in my, I mean, so this is the thing that I've come to realize more in hindsight. I was too competent, and I basically seemed like I didn't need any help. I mean, I
So
probably
no one challenged you and shit, you mean?
yeah, none of the so the people that I was like assigned to didn't really, like, I was more further down the path in most of the areas that they thought at least were
Yeah.
important, or
They felt
where they,
intimidated and stuff.
yeah, I mean, they just ignored me. They just, you seem fine, we're just
Well, they
gonna
didn't
ignore you.
relate, or
Yeah.
they didn't see. Oh, I see what you mean.
And I mean, and
Honestly,
so,
they say that's common in kids that have a learning disability. They feign competence.
oh yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I understand now. It's like that is like my whole masking thing.
Oh, it
A lot
is?
of yeah, I mean, a lot of times,
That's
sometimes people would say maybe aloof and disinterested.
Yeah.
But most of the time they'd feel like, oh, Mike, he's so chill. He just doesn't care about. He
But
doesn't
inside,
get fazed by anything.
Yeah.
But inside, I'm like, what's going on? And I'm
Yeah.
trying to like understand everything that's happening. And so then I would go back and like read and learn all this stuff to
do
try
it
to,
on your own.
yeah, make sense of life. And so, so the other thing I noticed in there is that,
common, I
like,
think.
they had a set of filters that they didn't recognize. It would filter for like charismatic personality types. So if
Mhm.
somebody came in there, and literally you could come in there, and if you were willing to say, oh, I'm really good at this stuff, put me in charge, they would give you the opportunities to be in charge of stuff. Might not actually be good at it, or they might be okay at it, but it wasn't, but the opportunities, they weren't really like trying to figure out, like, they had a little bit of a meritocracy, I would say, with music. And that was the thing. I was a pretty good guitar player, and I got a lot of opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't pay the bills, so that was part of the problem.
No, but they probably offered you a lot of free gigs, eh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got to do, yes, I did get to do some extra stuff because that was, and we got to go on a trip and record some songs we had written and things like that. So
That's
it
nice.
was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
But so my idea was like thinking like, okay, after I did that, and then I'm like, if I don't work for a church, I don't know how to make money.
Yeah.
And yeah, I learned a little bit of the kind of woodworking stuff from my dad. He was kind of a handyman, and
Mhm.
I did pursue my own self-learning in that to get much better. But then it kind of clicked on me to have the idea, like, okay, the problem with that program was like the discipleship idea was really good, but it was lacking that career element, because almost everybody that went there ended up having to go to a full 4-year school for something if they weren't going to do ministry. And even a lot of the people that did end up going into ministry, like, would end up doing that anyway, because so it basically, as a college alternative, it failed. And maybe I'm just so stubborn that I more or less have just refused to go. I mean, partially because I see that there is the edge of the horizon for the whole, like, go 4-year degree as the normal way.
In what though?
Well, I don't know, in the generic thing that's not like a STEM field or whatever. Like, like, because that was the thing of just, when everybody just goes to college because you're supposed to, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
and then people get degrees that require a bachelor's degree, but it might be in any field. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care.
Yeah,
is what you mean, yeah.
because, and even that's to
Or they
say,
pick the easiest one.
yeah, well, because from then you can build a resume, because skill in a career is far more valuable than a degree.
Why don't we say it's more pedigree is more valuable than skill? They don't even evaluate your skill, right?
Well,
Sadly.
yeah, maybe not in some fields. I mean, so when I went to go get the job that I have now, it was, here's stuff I've done, pictures of it, and I talked to the guy for a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, you know how to do, you will be good at this job, you can do it. And and my ability to do the job has kept me employed and got me a little bit of promotion, So the idea kind of came that there was some good aspects about the program, like with that mentorship thing, but what it was like centered around was not the best, because, well, maybe even because it just creates too much of a disconnect between like the clergy or whatever, even though they would probably use that word, but the people that
Them
are
and
like
us.
the them and us thing, and
Yeah.
really, and what I even realized is like, okay, the only people that I was like, I'm learning from a guy who's 20 years old, when I'm 19 or 18 or whatever, who has marginally more experience in theory than in regard to this very specific thing.
Yeah, sounds like the military. Yeah, but
Yeah. Whereas there's probably, and this was a big church in Illinois, like 3,000 people. So it's like there's probably 200 guys at least
Wow.
sitting in the pews that the church doesn't care for anything at all except for that they come and drop off their offering each week. But maybe they work in like these skilled trades, plumbing or electrical or carpentry or whatever, and they're godly men, husbands and fathers. They have so much more wisdom probably to offer.
Yes.
And and they would actually probably like to have the opportunity to share that wisdom.
Mentor.
Yeah. But what they are seeing is that what the church needs is the thing that's up on the stage, which is charismatic personalities, musical talent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a recognition of that value system. So my idea was to start somewhat of a program, and I like to try to do it myself to some degree. It's a little tricky because I do it somewhat with the kids in our church, but I don't own my own business, so I can't have I can't just take on an apprentice. I do try to do it with the guys at work that I train too, somewhat, and especially like in the work ethic and all that stuff. Like that's all deeply rooted in like a Christian worldview.
Beautiful.
But the idea would be maybe for a decentralized program or whatever. So any church could do this, and maybe it's a volunteer thing you just do on Saturdays. You get some old lady needs her yard cleaned up, or she needs something fixed. You get some dad whose kids are grown, or maybe are, whatever. He's got the time to do it. Maybe he wants to do it with his kids, but then also bring some other kids.
That's a better idea.
Alongside. You do some work. You have lunch together. You talk about life, and then
and you then ask him advice once they get comfortable.
Yeah, and then you can connect that to how it relates to the whole message of the Bible and what we are meant to be as human beings and in community. So that was kind of the idea. And I thought, that's like a way better way to do it.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's actually super beautiful because, like you said, you're doing good works for people in the community, which makes everyone look better. Yeah. Plus, these guys can go tag along because you're forgetting it's not just, and this is what I'm finding, it's not just a mentor, because I have a different background. I'm more like you, right? Like I put myself through college working as a locksmith, and I actually built docks for a couple summers. So I've seen how awesome it is to, work with your hands. It's not two things. People can be intellectual and scholarly, but also love to work with your hands. And I think that would go over so well, because what I'm arguing here is it's not just the young lads that would want to go and hang out with the older guys that has grown kids, but there might even be guys like maybe our age or a little younger who don't want to admit it's like, I struggle to put together an IKEA furniture. I love Yeah. And I think it's practice. Like people aren't going to use a YouTube to learn how to do this stuff. I think, right. Someone can't learn to make cabinets through YouTube. They got to do it. Right. I think that's a beautiful idea, dude, because you're helping the community. You're looking good. You're advertising.
And my idea is more or less like the church should be the one stewarding this knowledge and wisdom. Like it should, because even still, like, I mean, it does work to a certain degree,
the anchor of the community, right?
We moved here. When we first moved here, we, found a church. We weren't necessarily we found a church real quick to start. We weren't necessarily saying this is the church, but, We don't know anybody. My wife actually, she signed up for like ladies Bible studies at like 4 different churches at the same time, basically, like, you know, to see like who's, you know, if you ignore me, I'm not coming back. If I make, you know,
she just wanted to see how they run their Bible study. That's pretty good idea.
Just to meet people, because we had no
I've done that,
whatsoever,
but I never thought to compare them and how they run it.
Well, she and then you know, but then it's like, okay, well, and then we went somewhere on a Sunday, and it was, hey, we need to get some stuff looked at the car. Do you know a mechanic? And then it's, you know, and so you can still do that. You know, you go to a church and you can find.
Oh, yes.
You will get more connection to, if you like move to a new town. It's still a good starting place to get acquainted with the community, but it's not as, I would say those connections aren't as thick as they really should be.
I argue, and it's worse because I go to a couple different churches in my neighborhood, and everyone comes in and out in a clique. And another example is same as your church. They have a thrift store and separately serviced, but it's not the same group of people. The people that come into the thrift store are not the people that come, right? And follow me here. You've hit on something that I think we've missed. So they did a meta study of therapy, and they found that it might be it's certainly maybe not a net positive society since we've had therapy. And I don't think it's because of therapists. I think it's because what you hit on, right? Because church used to be ecclesia. It used to be the community, right? Like you said, you knew your mechanic, but it wasn't just someone you knew. Like when you went to the mechanic, you could actually unburden yourself of your problems. Like you said, like you guys would share discussions, and like I argue that's why Peterson might be missing a little bit of his spark. I'm not saying he's not doing too bad, but he used to be challenged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, it's like the big question, the questions that you have to answer are so valuable, because without them, well, you don't have wisdom without questions.
Yes. And people, and honestly, I think that's where doubt comes in. It's many people miss that doubt is what leads you to the great questions, not even answers. And I love that about Thomas Merton, because he woke me up to that idea that sometimes you just have to learn to sit with the questions, and that's more than getting the answers. Because when you get an answer, guess what comes up? More questions, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's kind of the idea. So I did that, and basically I kind of first wrote up, like, I just started writing, here's the problems with church, like the way we're doing it. And my real goal was thinking like, okay, I guess you could say examining my own path, because my dad had become a pastor. He just started as an interim when the other pastor retired.
Yeah.
Very small.
That's common around here. They're having a hard time getting pastors.
Like 20 people more or less on average, kind of a very small church.
Here. Yeah,
and he sat in that role for like 25 years. And him and my mom,
So around here it's a couple years at most, and then it's terrible.
So, well, after he left, they were staying on. They worked to find somebody else that was going to come, and then it died within a year. Like the church, it wasn't a good fit. So it was tough. But you know, I mean, that faithfulness is something like that. I see that in PVK. It's like PVK is the pastor that most reminds me of my dad. I think it's actually the experience
about what he was doing, right?
Yeah, like, well, and just the dedication and stuff, and that openness, like what he does with the randos and stuff. Like that's how
seems like Job to me. He's got the patience of Job.
Like that's how my dad was as a pastor, you know, on the phone with all these, like there was like a few, and there was people with like people, they had mental health problems.
I can imagine,
like that, and it's just like a church of 20 people. He worked as a teacher full time, but most of the time he had left over was
his time was spent with that.
It was taken up by that small amount of people and their problems, you know, and
that's why they can't get people to do it, probably.
Yeah, and so you know, it's like watching Paul. It was like, oh, this was like, it was a little bit weird because like, well, this is my dad, so I didn't have that relationship with him, but I'm like, oh, this is what it's like to have a guy like my dad as your pastor. I knew him as dad, so, and like he was a great dad too.
But, you're seeing what your dad would have looked like to somebody else.
Yes.
Love that. See, it's like your dad's being reopened to you.
Yeah.
Set of eyes.
And the sad part is, I worked in worked for other churches, not as the senior pastor, but in
but you
on
helped
staff.
out in an admin role.
And I did not have, like they were talking about on Friday, pastoral care or whatever. I did not receive that in any of the time there. Basically,
so like this, what you mean when you say pastoral care? You mean like they teach you the psychology of how to help people and guide them?
No, but basically because I was competent in doing Christian things more so I'd say good enough to appear as if there wasn't anything really going. It got complicated when I was working on a staff because it's like, okay, if I'm struggling with something and I talk to somebody, I'm jeopardizing my job. And they didn't have anything in place. I didn't have any like anybody checking in on me to see how I was doing. Really, it was just assumed I was good.
Assumed everything
because I appeared good.
That's the worst. And common, I think.
Yeah, and so partially in an attempt to address but at some point I had basically decided as a teenager, like the church is the most important thing in the gospel, and so obviously the most important thing is to be a minister or to go in the ministry in some sense. So that's why I went down the path I went on and didn't focus at all on how you make a living or all the other aspects of life, which are my mouse is frozen. Mark's here. Okay, back in. All right. So examining my crazy journey, I started why didn't this whole thing work? They had a program, they had programs set up, they had this thing, and then I started to just realize all the things they're not addressing. I recognized how my own mental and spiritual health were improved by starting to work with my hands full time. That whole embodied element of it, connecting that to my faith. Yeah. Well, and just realizing church, and also not realizing I was on the spectrum at this time either. But being church is this confusing thing where people say a lot of stuff and then they act in different ways, and you don't know when you're doing good or when you can't.
They don't give you the right feedback. You mean?
Yeah. But you give me a problem with some cabinets and I will cut it apart and put it back together, and it works. And and realizing hey, this works this way because of the way that God created the universe that we live in, and we can understand it because of the way that He created us to perceive reality. And that's a really important thing that itself doesn't get talked about very much in church.
It does. They use a different language. They say we are made in the image of God.
Yeah,
I think that's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, that anything that's got there's a big problem with the fact that Christianity has a lot of terms that they use regularly without defining. Well, that gets it on a whole other rabbit trail. But anyway, so I started to think about this idea. I started writing the book. I started kind of coming up with the plan for a kind of discipleship trades thing, thinking maybe just because there's a lot of guys that aren't finding good jobs, these aren't meaningful jobs. If you are smart in other areas, financially, you can make it work. You don't need to if you know how to fix a house, you can buy a cheaper house and fix it yourself. So it's a way that works, but there's also a lot of other values too. Because I thought maybe somebody does want to go and become a pastor or something. Having some background knowledge in working with your hands is going to make you a lot more relatable and understandable to regular guys who are actually the most unchurched demographic overall is men. It's 60% women.
don't forget,
40% men church.
I think the part of that reason is I hear it all the time from churches that they think the way to men is through women, because historically it was the women, right? The more women that were in church, the more men as spouses. So I think you're finding something that's cool, is a way to get men to be part of the church itself without having the women. Because we have a whole generation, I think, of single people coming up.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? I think you're seeing a new window that we can come at them from two ends, through their spouses and their girlfriends, but also hit them directly, right?
Well, yeah.
So
and-
if you want to meet a good woman, you go to church.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. But
kind of. But here's the problem. And I mean, it's the real problem is fatherlessness. And,
yes, they need a
actually
guide.
fathers that actually aren't there,
Yeah.
or fathers that don't know how to be good fathers.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have good fathers.
Oh, that relates to the other thing.
And it's interesting. So I did write a pretty exploration of how I think that actually, like, the kind of with the feminist movement, when it came on, it was actually like the good fathers were probably the most encouraging towards their daughters to pursue career opportunities and things like that. And because of their influence, those daughters were actually really successful. But by doing so, those are the ones that got the most success, and they were the most likely to avoid to not get married or not have kids, because they had the most success in the career pursuit. And that means that the women with the best if the women with the best fathers aren't having kids, then that wisdom gets like passed down even less, like like by half or whatever.
Well, you know what I used to say in
They don't have
business?
grandkids.
Well, I used to make the joke in business that first-rate managers hire first-rate employees. Second-rate managers hire third-rate employees. And that's what you're arguing here, is that a bad parent produces a poor seed, and a poor seed begets an even more inferior seed, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and I think well, some of that. So I think that there was the whole like the whole feminist thing, when it began, and it was probably actually the good parents that the better parents went along with it more, like, because, like, I have daughters, and it's like, yeah, I know my daughters are very smart and competent. And if I directed their competency towards academic things, or maybe athletics, or things like that, things that, like, I understand as a father who's a man, they will probably be good at them. And the more attention I give towards them, the better they'll get at that. The one thing that I do not know exactly how to train them to be good at is being wives and mothers. So
can I? There's another thing you're missing. If you have a good father, and I think even the best fathers would say that they're probably not doing a good job. And I certainly wouldn't say I'm doing a good job, but I don't think I'm a bad father on the grand scale of things. But when you have a particularly good father, it kind of sets a standard that your children are looking at.
Yeah.
And for your daughters, I mean, for your children at a certain point in time, for me, my father was my God when I was a certain age. So I looked up to him as a role model and how to behave and blah, 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 and all this stuff. He was my God.
Yeah.
Now, daughters also go through a similar thing like that. And so if you have a particularly good father, then you're going to measure all your potential mates against him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's particularly good. No one's going to meet that level. So that also limits the... You see what I mean?
Yeah, that does. Yeah. So I wrote this whole thing, and I didn't know the language at the time, but a lot of it is what John Vervaeke's been talking about, how, like, because now they can say, like, you can predict what their faith beliefs will be, is based on the credible people in their lives, the most credible people. And so, and I was looking at it as, like, it's this consistency, like, how much does what you say line up with what you do? And in some ways, like, inconsistency, a bad dad that's also inconsistent, like, it actually doesn't work out so bad. Like, because if you have like a parent who's like an alcoholic or something, a lot of times, what does the kid end up saying? I'm never going to touch alcohol once in my life. And they rebel essentially against that bad parenting and become better, at least, in that area, and, probably some other areas too. And potentially, and I don't know how often you see this, but like, I'm guessing this is what it's like with the globalist people. They're evil and they're really competent, and then they train their kids to be evil and competent.
I could spend a few hours talking about that.
Yeah,
I don't want to go there.
No, we don't have to go there. But then you get the other, because if you make like a little, so you have like good and bad, like morally, and then you have like consistent or inconsistent in your expression of values or whatever, basically. So if you make like a little grid with that, so you have like bad example and bad values. That's like the alcoholic dad. Good example of bad values. That's your globalist.
Americans are so down on alcohol. It cracks me up.
Well, no, well, yeah, because everybody. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm talking about people that actually are alcoholics, like ruin their
people whose addictions ruin their lives.
Yes, it doesn't have to be alcohol.
Because I drink a lot.
Yeah,
I don't think it. I mean, maybe it does ruin my life a bit, but
yeah. So that's one, and so then you'd have the best one. So the best one would be good values and a consistent display of those values. So that's a good dad. A good dad teaches good things and he does it well. He lives it out and he's consistent in it. But then you have this other one that's a dad who says the good things, or but he's not a good dad. Like, he's a weak father, overrun by the wife, doesn't accomplish much in life, can't keep a job, or he's and it's like that. So kids are always going to rebel against, they follow in the footsteps of parents that, especially fathers, that are consistent, but they rebel against the ones that are inconsistent. And so the problem with that, like the bad dads that say, whether like Christian hypocrites or if they're just weak men or whatever, is that they're teaching their kids like everything you say about Jesus is nonsense because you're just using it as a crutch or whatever, so anyway, but that was the kind of thing I worked out, but it kind of goes with the whole thing that John Vervaeke's been talking about, credibility. And
I don't think I wholly disagree with you, but can I put it into my words and
sure.
See if we're talking about the same thing? So what's important to me? My word, my honor, as it turns out. Took me a long time to learn that. Nobody taught me that. If I promise my children something or anyone else, then I will hold myself to my word.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't often make promises, but when I do, I will bloody well keep them, no matter how much I have to suffer for it.
Yeah.
So I think that's related to consistency.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really have a struggle with this good bad.
Well, it's not it doesn't have to be good bad, but it's basically like whatever. Well, it doesn't. Yeah, it could just be. It is whatever values, and it's like I mean, I had this whole thing worked out because of like, well, how come women don't want to get married anymore, essentially, and like it's a weird mix because it's not like you do have these girls that become like promiscuous, but then you also do have a lot of really competent women that are excelling in their careers, and they're not seeing the value in marriage, and I believe that's because they were taught a philosophy. They were consistently taught a philosophy that had a little bit of a lie in it. In that it said like marriage was keeping women down or things
All
like that.
philosophy has a little bit of a lie in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, if I could maybe weigh in on that, I think the failure in that is seeing marriage as a value proposition. Oh, what's wrong? What happened?
Sorry, I was talking to a
Oh,
child.
that's okay. I thought maybe I did something. Pardon me.
No.
I'm terrible at this technology stuff. So I just, me coming from a finance background, utility is a term that we use in economics, which is the value you get from something, but it's a different idea of value. It's your return. It's your use that you get out of something. So I think where we fail in society, marriage is not a value proposition. We've turned it into such, but what it is you should be, honestly, and I could talk about this in other ideas as far as identity, but you should be finding someone who makes you want to be better than your previous self and supports you in that. And I think it's a very gestalt idea that two people should get together and become more than the sum of their parts, right? That these two people, when they come together, they don't just produce children, but because of the two of them being together, suffering the wheel and woe of life, the vicissitudes, probably my favorite English word, they are both better than their previous selves, and together they produce. And there's your, like in Chinese, in the Chinese Book of Change, that's the basis of society, is the people in, what would you call it, together, right? And then it grows from there. Then it's the household next to you, and then it's 5 households, and then it's the village and the city and the world. And I think that's what we're missing, because we don't see the value proposition in being your authentic self and interacting with. You follow what I mean? It's what Nietzsche said, that institutions fail when we lose what was in us that had us create the institutions. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think I chastised a whole group on, I think it was a Paul Vanderklay call. They were talking about marriage, and I said, you're looking at marriage from as a, what did I say? As flat earthers. You're looking only
Yes
at the
and no.
horizontal. You're not seeing the vertical. And then I said,
very
marriage
left
is
hemisphere view.
90% woo.
That's true, though. Well, from what
Maybe not 90%, but
no, but you're right. It fits to what, I don't know if you were listening. What Michael was talking about earlier is that some of our greatest skills or our occupations or our pastimes are something that we can't define how to do or what we get from it. I think that's what you're getting at. Most of what we get from a marriage is something we can't list on a, a perspective.
Daddy, look at my new shoes.
oh, you got to show the new shoes. So, Almighty Ohm.
Yeah.
Have you done the random conversation, or
No.
can you tell us a bit about yourself? I'm really curious. I like a lot of the stuff you say. I like the cut of your jib.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, if I could just relate this back, it's so freaking, it's destiny, really, because the gentleman I was listening to, and it's funny too, because it relates to PBK. He was mentioning about mega churches, and there is actually kind of a mega church that I follow because I love him, because he does chapter by chapter, line by line Bible study. But he also does a prophecy update, is what he calls it. And what was kind of cool, and this is where I think this is what Michael was getting at earlier. So he was talking about Noah, and he talked about the flood, but he failed to go on. And this is what we were talking about earlier. He failed to go on and talk about not just what happened after the flood, but God's covenant with Noah. And if I could, just quickly, I'll read one section from chapter 8, line 21, the second half of line 21, where he says, and this is God, the Lord speaking. He says, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Right? And he goes on and says, neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I've done. And so, anyways, I think you guys have hit on something dead on. Like, this predates everything else in the Bible. And what God was teaching us is that we have, and I think that's that, what would you call it? Original sin, the sense that we all are lazy creatures,
Hey,
or
Luke.
anyway. So this is why I'm here, is because I've found it hard to find people who want to look into this sort of stuff deeply, like y'all have been talking about, right?
So can I say something?
Of
So I'm an
course.
electronics engineer. The reason we can control electrons is because electrons are lazy. And
Oh
they
my God, I love that.
almost
Electricity is
always follow the path of least resistance.
good point.
That's how
That's how
control
nature
is
works. Yeah.
enabled, because everyone follows the path of least resistance.
So true.
Not everyone, but
Well, okay, that's the thing that fits in, okay, because we have a world, and I argue that it fits into everything. So I argue that we have a world filled with narcissists because we not only encourage narcissism, but we also discourage the opposite, openness. And the same can be said for this. So we encourage, and I think McGilchrist failed, and I haven't slogged through his whole recent book because it's technically 3 books. It's like 10,000 pages long.
I think he failed as well.
Yeah, a matter of things. But no, what I mean by fail, he's awesome. He's almost totally explained his theory of the left and right hemisphere. But where he fails is, I don't believe we're all stuck like that. I think Michael was explaining he's very right-brained like me. But I think a lot of people get lazy. We try to flatten the world. And having a right brain view of the world is, I think, challenging to that simple view of the world. Everyone wants 3 choices, right? No more. And I think and this is where McGilchrist fails, I think we're encouraging our people to be more left concentric because it is so much more difficult to look at the bigger picture and come back down to details and zoom out. So I argue we're teaching people to believe that we're naturally lazy. We can't be other. The example I give is talk about Vervaeke. I think Vervaeke fails in his meaning crisis because he argues from old philosophy that we have 2 types of thinking, system 1 and system 2. I argue we only, what he argues, that we are always in system 1, like the automatic thinking, because we have to save what they call ego depletion. I argue that's a fantasy we believe. I believe we can develop a deeper and stronger sense of mindfulness, of presence, that system 2 thinking, the complicated, deeper thinking. But it takes practice. And in our everyday world where we only read headlines and people feed us, the information we need instead of us needing to grok the information, integrate it, and then maybe re-express it out. So that's why I think this little group here are among the few that are actually digging deeply into almost any question. You guys are weird because most groups are digging into one question, but you guys will take on almost anything. And so that's the biggest thing that I love. Like, y'all are among the rare air that are,
Gonna have to slightly disagree with you.
Yeah. Sorry, you guys are lazy.
So you said Michael was, and they have this left-right brain thing, and I'm just like, oh, for God's sake, just use the term head and heart, and that's much easier to remember. And I think it's the same thing. But what Gilchrist misses is body.
Yeah, so often.
And you said, Michael, I think you said he's more heart, and actually I think he's more body.
Yeah. Well, so hold on. I'm talking to the Ian McGilchrist. I love your idea because I believe we've missed that. The mind, body, heart, soul. I just strictly how a lot of these secularists, and I think Ian McGilchrist falls into that. Even though he's open to the meta, he still isn't in that camp yet.
It's all here for him.
Yes. So he's not talking about heart at all, my good man. He just means left brain is.
He doesn't know how to talk about heart.
He does.
Because he didn't connect with it.
That might be it.
I just put in the private chat if you guys want to download it. It's a little introduction in the private chat. Is the link to Google Doc. It's a little introduction I've been working on to send out to people. Kind of got a little bit of my story, but it has links to my book and everything, so you can download a copy, and so you guys can mess around with it. So if you can find that, I just don't want to share it publicly, but
no worries. You'll have to let us in. So
yes, it's on the private. If you go to where it says private chat on your thing, that's.
I've clicked on it. I'll check it out later. And if I like it, I'll buy the book anyway.
Okay. Well, yeah. You can give me feedback on the thing too. So I've been because it's hard trying. So, the bottom line with my whole thing is that I realize I've gotten to the top of where I can go in figuring things out without some sort of mentor or guide or partner. So trying to reach out and find people that are
Yes.
know how to do more stuff in real life. Possibly somebody that's either a church, a pastor at a church that has that gets the vision, has the right vision, or somebody in the business world more connected with that. So that's what I've been working on. But yeah, but you can also check out everything in there.
Can I recommend something to y'all? Like, I learned this. See, I'm such a weirdo because I originally wanted to study philosophy, and they discouraged me so hard that they turned me into a businessman, and I took finance and economics and spent a life in finance, but I still love philosophy. But so I'll give you an example. One of my favorite professors. He's been my professor for probably 10 years now. He's the foremost professor in Sanskrit and Vedanta and Trika Shaivism, Tantra. But what I love about him is he will learn from whatever will teach him. So he was from Nepal, but he couldn't find a tantric. His lineage is tantric. He actually comes from. He has empowerment. He's an acharya, and so he wanted to continue this tradition, but he couldn't find another tantric teacher. So he actually went with a Vedantin teacher. And that's the same thing that I did. I couldn't find any teachers that were teaching exactly the way I felt. So I just went and learned from them. And even my professor misunderstood at first when we first started interacting, because I asked him a question once about the syncretism between some of these teachings. And he thought I was, and I'm going to throw a little shade, he thought I was going the way of maybe Vervaeke, right? Where he's blending a little bit from this tradition and trying to piece it together. I was actually asking about seeing these universal truths that Huxley was writing about. And so what I like to mention to people is don't keep yourself in Christian circles. Like, people will throw shade on me because I will read, I love the the saints of the church, the doctors of the church. I love reading them, but I don't read them wholly. I think that's the thing, right? I'll read Augustine and I can criticize him, like when he says we don't need to learn rightly how to love ourselves. I think he's wrong, right? And so I love being able to, how can you say this? Not just non-denominational, be open-minded enough to maybe you could learn from an imam or an acharya or a Buddhist monk from their teaching, right? They might even be a mentor for you because the same people are coming to the Buddhist. I gave tours in a Buddhist temple for a long time, and it's the same people that are coming to the Buddhist temples looking for the same, or looking to sit with the same questions, believe it or not, as the people coming to the church. So I think you could get the same sort of mentorship.
Can I put that into a really ordinary level?
Oh, sorry. Was it not simple? And I apologize.
No. You'll understand when I say it. So I talked about superpowers earlier in the conversation.
And I agree with that too. We all have genius inside of us.
One of my wife's superpowers is she can talk to anyone. And
it relate to everybody.
Yeah. And it's
rare.
It's been quite a painful lesson for me watching her do it and thinking, holy crap, I'm just shit at this.
Oh, yeah.
But there is no one and nobody that she can't learn something from.
Oh, she's open-minded then. Is that what you're saying? Her trick? How does she relate? What do you think it is?
She's just interested in people.
That's what I think. The open-minded.
She doesn't have the prejudice that I have. She's just like, oh, who are you?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. Exactly. The way I rate it is Bruce Lee.
Simple.
Yeah.
Not these highfalutin cloud-sitting monks.
Well, that's something y'all said earlier. I got to say. I mentioned this to Michael. So I put myself through college by working with my hands. And I got to say, some of the most intelligent people, in fact, I have some friends who are poets, and one of them didn't finish grade 8, and he's brilliant. You know, some of the working class people I know are some of the smartest. And I'm not saying this as to be mean, but honestly, some of the dumbest people I know have a graduate level education, right? I'm not being mean. It's just a fact, right? They only know their tiny little area, and sometimes only from 20 years ago, sadly, you know, but Yeah, I agree with all of that.
I don't disagree with that. In fact, before I went to university, I was a mature student at the age of 21.
Yeah, everyone else was 18. Or...
Yeah.
That must have
And
been
I was
weird.
told before I went that I'll be impressed at how smart some of the people are. And I wasn't, but I was shocked at how dumb most of the people were.
Yep. It's just that couple of years, eh?
Very strange. I got to blow my nose. I'll be back.
Yeah, it's gotten so much worse though, because I was educated in the 90s before things went soft, right? Spoon feeding education instead of making you work for it. Because I'm in your camp, Michael. Sorry, I believe that we need to teach your kids to be autodidacts and polymaths. So they should be self-taught and learn multiple fields and stuff.
Yeah. Well, some of my thought was too, just like so I remember it especially because I lived very much in like a churchy bubble, and then got out and into the real world. And
See how you use the verbiage though into the real world.
Well, I mean, in having to make adult decisions, in some ways, it was a good. It's funny because, like, thinking about like how I went for so long without discovering, like, oh, I have autism. Like some of it was because, and this is part of what I think is the solution is like to addressing that is because I was in a very understanding community, and the church that I worked at, because I was interested in ministry or whatever. This was a church that I knew most of the people from since high school. It was the bigger church down the road from my dad's church, and they kind of had their fingers in all sorts of things because it was in New England, which is not very, it's an expensive area, but not a very religious area. So they just had to figure out how to make things make do with things. So they had a school, they had the thrift stores. The pastor's wife did real estate, which helped her find a lot of cheap buildings, good deals on buildings and stuff. So then they would be able to provide housing for people that would work there, some kind of a secondary job besides just whatever the Sunday morning thing, and it was a very involved community. Now the problem was, you get almost to a cult. I wouldn't say it was a cult.
I know what you mean.
Like
you live in a silo. It's a little weird.
and I would say, like, so for me personally, now I would say they are a wonderful people, and because it was mostly the family in charge that was kind of doing it, and they had a very particular family dynamic and way, and it was not a great place for me and my personality long term. But
you were hiding your full
yeah.
Because you were afraid they wouldn't accept you, or did you really get signs that they wouldn't?
Well, I had a few earlier experiences of trying to be vulnerable in some areas and kind of got shut down. Like, we're not going to talk about this. And
they were uncomfortable, is what the truth.
And so that, and it's not, honestly, it's like things probably would have been, should have been, or could have been pushed through. But I have a very high sensitivity to rejection, so, and that's how I gain my competence. Because if something goes bad, I do not make that mistake again. I learn really quick with people, and so, but because of that, I didn't, moving to a whole new state and starting from scratch. That was like, and then we were there, and the whole COVID thing went down, and I had a whole like crisis of like, is the world going to end, with some of my I definitely had a lot of that kind of left behind end times things I'd grown up with, and just like trying to figure out what's going on, and kind of had put more of my, like, so it was very disillusioning when Trump lost, because I was kind of like thinking like, how did, like, I was like, this, like, what's going to happen, and are my rights as a Christian going to be stripped? Are people going to try to take away our kids and all this stuff? And that was kind of the thing where I had like God spoke to me. It was a very amazing thing. Like in that moment, like when I was having like almost a panic attack, like I felt the presence of God, and basically telling me like you can't worry about the whole problem, but you need to,
Like Job.
but the way forward is to like I mean, this is the whole thing. A culture war is stupid because you're just fighting over dead and dying institutions. Culture is not culture isn't built, is built. It's not created through war. It's cultivated.
Or
And so that
imposed.
was
It's not imposed. I
yeah,
think.
and so that was basically the thing to say like what needs to be done is and then if you have institutions and things like local church, um, they don't need to be bulldozed and start from scratch. That's an impulse a lot of
Nope.
people have.
Reconstruction, not deconstruction.
Yes, and reintegration of all these other elements that have been
You got to
missing.
reintegrate the spirit of the institution.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be a
Like
holistic
that.
thing that connects to the whole aspect of people's lives. I mean, I actually really think that it's the like Judeo aspect of the Judeo Christianity that's missing, whereas and it's also you have that more in the traditions that are non evangelical, I guess you could say. But I think that that is also a really important thing because you actually are seeing your neighbor who's, not doing so good and you want to reach out and you want to bring them into your community. But we just do it in a very thin way when we just make it about like getting somebody to convert and to say a prayer. What we should be doing is seeing lost sheep and then you bring them into the fold and then you shepherd them and protect them and be with them. We don't go the whole way. We just say like, oh, we got one from the outside and then we send them back out there essentially half the time. So but it's that balance of that thing of like a whole life and also that evangelistic mission to reach out to the people that are outside and bring them in. But I think maybe it's supposed to be through a slower, more organic process of wooing them in some sense. Like that's what you should be doing. And because I mean, if you look at like the marriage symbolism of the Bible, essentially, that's what it is God is wooing Israel and wooing the church into a right relationship with him. He's not imposing his will. He's not scolding them for the mistakes they make. It's a gentle, loving correction that addresses the actual needs that people have, but maybe they just made a mistake by going down the wrong path or whatever. So so it was really trying to find that balanced approach that kind of helped me put things together. Yeah.
Well, I got to say this. So here's I was literally, this story fits for both things you said. It actually was originally just a little note I wanted to share with you when you were talking about how you were supported or the lack of support with you being on the spectrum.
You probably have to go. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yes. All right. I'm good. You're muted.
I was afraid it was an emergency. You good?
I think I meant to mute myself. And
yeah, you muted me. That's all right. There was nothing going on.
No,
I was just catching up on the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh,
so if I can give you what I was going to say. So originally I was going to tell you a story that I think should teach anybody who's on the spectrum. And I think it's a lot of people. It's not just the people that get diagnosed. So there's three kinds of people, especially if you go back historically, right? So I'll start with the most positive story, Temple Grandin.
mhm,
So her mother was chastised for how she pushed Temple her whole life, right? Refused to believe the doctors that told her that she wasn't going to read and all this jazz. She pushed her, pushed her. Well, she got a PhD now. And what was interesting is she became famous because she went to a conference on autism, and everyone else was trying to um, cure these kids of their habits instead of working with them, right? So, what I mean by that is Temple stood up and said, "No, my mom was right to push me." And yet, I can give you an example. Like me, I had dyslexia growing up, but I was forgotten because no one like you didn't notice. So I had to figure it out for myself. I had to learn myself. But then someone like our ex prime minister, who had a silver spoon in his mouth and a what do you call that? A trust fund. He was told because he has dyslexia, he can't learn. So he became a drama teacher, right? So I argue that's what we're seeing with people with faith. You're not going to see everyone coming in with faith. What we need to do is understand that we're on a spectrum of faith, same as autism. Some people have, like you've seen, strong, dedicated faith. But at the other end, we have people who think they may be even atheists, but they just haven't lived or experienced people with real faith. Imagine if you grew up around the worst of the worst people. Would you not disbelieve or have doubts of the existence of God? And I think we're excluding a big segment of the society because even if you haven't been raised in a horrible environment, we're raised on the world. You said it earlier, the apocalyptic view of the world. And that's a separate thing. I think there's a misunderstood. The Christian apocalyptic view, I think, has grown from the fact that it was two people. It was pagans who weren't living for the future and Christians who were. Of course, you were going to be persecuted by those type of people. And we've turned it into this whole nightmarish thing. And I think it's just because, long story short, people aren't working on themselves. You get what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
sorry, I
that
digress. But
no,
yes,
that's great because the apocalypse part was the part of how that reminded me where I was originally
yeah,
going. So I was thinking about that, like, okay, so then I started because I was having this kind of crisis and a panic attack and wondering about like because we had just our second daughter had just been born like right before it was before the pandemic and you know like if this
that
is like
time.
if we're going into like a tribulation, it's like why like, but I'm like, but I know having like because I think of all things, becoming a father was like the most eye opening thing of all. In in that like I had probably I could say it all works out, but like I wasn't supported going down that path. I wasn't unsupported. It just like the church that I worked at, and my wife worked there too, and many other people worked there. We're
Mhm.
very happy to have a lot of single people that were very dedicated to the ministry,
Yeah, they love their
and
volunteers.
and weren't, and no one was really saying like you guys need to get married and stuff like that. And most of the people had one person or the other that was making a lot more money. My wife and I were actually some of the only ones where we were both working for the church fully with no
Yeah,
other side
so you're
jobs.
both broke.
Yeah, we're both broke, and it's fine, because they provided our housing and stuff. So
You get the spiritual riches, right?
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think they should have had a little bit more faith in being generous towards their staff,
Yes.
but
Well, think about it. It's through my works you will see my faith. Like
yeah,
if you don't have enough faith in your church that you exactly. It's not the prosperity gospel. It's the idea of you're already it's what a black man said. Who was it? Oh, Dave Chappelle. He said his father, when he complained, I hate being poor, and his father said, you ain't poor, son. That's poor is a state of mind. He said, you're broke. There's a difference.
So that's a digression. But so
Oh,
the
I'm
point
sorry.
the point I wanted to make is because what I discovered upon when I became a father is that I had kind of absorbed, and this is bad because it was present in the church,
Yeah.
kind of a message that's very prevalent in our world of like kids are kind of a drag, like, and in church world it's like, you're supposed to be married, you're not supposed to have sex outside of marriage, so getting married is good because then you get to have sex, but then like, kids, it's a responsibility, it's a burden, it's a drag,
Yeah.
whatever. And then like and so I felt very unprepared for that, so then always told my wife, I'm like, but I'm like, yeah, I know, like I know, and maybe I was aware that it was a big responsibility, and so I was somewhat scared of it in that sense. Because why, you should be scared of, if you're not scared of or
Responsibility. Yeah.
yeah, if you
Not
don't,
real
you're not
responsibility.
accurately accessing
Or
what
you're
it
not
is.
challenging yourself enough.
Right. So but then like after the experience of becoming a father, and then like realizing like, oh man, like even just thinking like people be like, oh, you want to like change dirty diapers, and then like, so I see my little daughter, newborn daughter, and be like, this child is so helpless, she cannot do anything
Yeah.
on her own, and she's crying, whether it's pain or just discomfort or whatever. She's in a new environment, everything is scary, and it's like, why wouldn't I just absolutely rush to go and change her dirty diaper if that is the thing that's causing her like uh discomfort in this moment. And then just realizing like that is the power of that love of a helpless creature that has unlimited potential, or and how much they grow through your love, and like, oh, that's the way that God loves us.
Yeah.
And so then I was really like, why isn't the church telling all young men that fatherhood is the greatest pursuit and joy and passion that you should be orienting your life around?
Yep. That is
And
the
then
ultimate. Right?
and then you realize that it's such an uphill battle now, as just for people aren't interested in it, but also just like the economics of it and all this stuff, it's like it's become such an uphill battle. And
But there's your value equation again, instead
yeah,
of realizing that not all things that matter can be valued, and not all things that can be valued matter. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Right.
Well, but economically, the economic portion of it is because we have put an overemphasis and value
Exactly.
on the wrong things, and we made the
Yeah.
wrong things cheap, or because they were cheap, we flooded the market with simulations of intimacy and affection and all this stuff. And so then I was like, this is absolutely a good thing. And it's like, okay, if this is a good thing, why would God put me in this position of being a father and having these young children to advocate this, if it's just like the end of the world or whatever? And so then I'm like, maybe it's not the end of the world. But then I realized, well, there are some more optimistic strains of eschatology out there, and there's kind of some people that do, in some sense, maybe think things are going to keep getting better, and maybe they will, but they get better in a very peculiar way. There's a lot of getting
Job
worse
again.
that happens.
Yes. Read
And
Job.
especially like in a local sense. So it's like, yeah, we might not have a global catastrophe, but that doesn't mean our country's not going to go to hell in a handbasket, or some devastation couldn't happen in this particular area. And so basically I kind of thought like, okay, I need to figure out a plan that will work, that can work now, but doesn't depend on like things necessarily getting better in the future, like politically or stuff like that. Cause like I couldn't control that. And so that's when I kind of just started looking at this like local thing of like, hey, you still got like local churches, you got small businesses, you got people in the neighborhood and the communities. Like these people have wisdom, they have things to offer. We're just really doing a bad job of connecting them. And probably, I think you scale it up a level to like within a town, like the churches aren't really talking with each other in an effective way. And it's like and so that was like, yeah, I like the future. And so what I thought, I was like, okay, well, if you're more of a generalist, if you learn a little bit, if you have a little experience about this stuff, and like that's even to say like the people that founded companies way back when, they
Mhm.
started doing the real work, and then they have to transition into becoming a manager and a CEO and an owner of a company. But the people that built the companies all knew how to do essentially everything that the person in the company knew how to do.
Mhm.
But now you just have like this managerial class or whatever, and it's like everybody benefits from that, not from knowing like the chain of knowledge, or not even just the chain of command, but like the series of how all those steps relate. Like it
Yes.
really, and I even heard Temple Grandin talking about that, how it's like,
Systems
you
thinking.
yeah, and like how, you're running this company, like you need to, there's some maintenance guy that's been keeping something from falling apart, and as soon as he retires, you're going to have a problem on your hands, and
No
you
one's
don't
being
know what
trained
it is.
to replace
Yeah,
him either,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And so
And he
my
can't explain it, how he's kept it alive. Yeah, you're so right.
yeah. And so my thought was basically just like, well, okay, special, because we've gone so big on specialization, and the church
Yep.
has done that too,
Yep.
in the way that they specialize on Sunday morning, essentially.
Yes, because they should be using that building the rest of the week too.
Yeah, yeah, and there's the benefits of specialization, is that you can do
Mhm.
more of what you can do a more exceptional job in one area. But if anything goes wrong, your specialization is useless.
Well,
And
or worse yet, like you said, like when honestly, I you hit on it. Like I think the church is specialized for a time and a place that doesn't exist anymore.
yeah, yeah. And so like, but if you have, well, I mean, I don't know, I kind of think it's like churches should be like Noah's Ark. It's like fill it up with all of the knowledge and all of the seeds and the the beginnings of a future world. That way, if disaster comes, and we did see this
Oh,
in some extent, like what happened out there in the Carolinas with the floods,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
there was like churches, people coming out there, and they did recognize the value in in the trades. And I think, like hearing Jordan Hall speak about it, seems like a lot of that was really orchestrated by like the Holy Spirit, but it should be something that the church is consciously aware of, like the value of those people that are already in your communities and have those skills.
Can I can I maybe highlight what you mean here is can we get to a point where it isn't till catastrophe happens that
Yeah,
we value these things? I mean, I think it was Schopenhauer who said we learn best through loss. So I think we need to, like you said, like we forget that you don't want someone who's a great speaker. Okay, I'll give you an example. That mega church, one of the guys they have come up to fill in for the pastor is the guy who can pronounce all the names in the Bible perfectly. Like, who cares? Like, get me
yeah,
the plumber who can't pronounce it properly, but he will explain the Bible or the message of the Bible in a way that will resonate for me and my kids. And you know what I mean? Like you said earlier, we need more of the firemen and the policemen and the carpenters and the plumbers to be part of the church because that is what's going to show. Like, think about this. The way I see it is imagine if your plumber is like the coolest dude ever. He doesn't rip you off. He's honest. He's cool to be around. You know what I mean? Like that's, I think, the best advertisement for a church because I think
mhm,
people will eventually pay attention to that stuff. Like, why is this guy so awesome? Why is his kids so great? And I think what they'll see is you'll see through my faith through my works. I
yep,
point to Deuteronomy 6 and 7. Our job is to raise our kids so that the community is better, even if we're making the community better for people who aren't fellow Christians. It doesn't matter because that'll help our kids as well. You get what I mean? And
yeah,
that's what I
yeah.
think we're missing.
Yeah, well, and that was even the thing, because I had all this fear about disaster, but the
Yes.
solutions being
I hate
offered
that.
are just like pray, make
Yeah.
sure you're really living a
Helplessness.
godly life,
Yeah.
make sure you're not sinning, and
Yeah.
maybe tell your neighbors. Although at a certain point, it kind of turns into a weird bunker mentality where it's supposed to where the churches don't even reach out anymore. Like,
Oh, they hide. They
yeah,
literally hide, I think, behind their walls. Yeah.
and so my thought was like, okay, if maybe it's like preparing for but it's also because, like, that rapture thing, like, it's an escape valve. It's going to get really bad, but we're banking on getting out of here.
Yes.
It's like, what if you bank on not getting out of here? Like,
Yes.
if you prepare for the possibility of actually living in a disaster, that might actually be the best chance you have at averting it from happening. Because if you ignore it, you're almost guaranteeing that it's going to hit you. It's going to come, or when it comes, you won't be prepared.
Mhm.
So that was kind of the starting of the whole way of thinking, and it is really like, like I was saying over the other day. It's like 80% of this kind of like post-mill, we have yet to see the great things that are going to happen in this world.
Yeah,
But
a
like
lot of
with
promises.
20% of like hedging our bets in that, like, a meteor or a flood or something, something bad could happen, and and we're still around to deal with the consequences. So that's kind of the
Can I
gist
freak
of it.
you're like blow your mind, bud? Because this is some of the stuff that I think it was Augustine who wrote this idea. He said that, and I think he would agree with the next philosopher I'm going to mention, but he said that imagine going to heaven and bowling a perfect game every time you bowl. Right? This idea that heaven is not something we should be pining for, because it's going to be arguably boring in the sense, right? Because we only know what we value by what, we lose that idea of good versus, and I think Mark would agree with me, this idea of good versus evil or good versus bad. We only know what's good or what's valuable or what's true by what isn't. You get what I mean? And so what I want to point to, I think, is Friedrich Nietzsche's most misunderstood philosophy. And follow me here. If you were to stop, like, forget about what I said earlier about how the apocalyptic view of the Christian was simply the fact that there's two kinds of people in the world: ones that want to do better than the previous people to make the world a better place, Deuteronomy chapter 6 and 7, and then there's people who, pagans, I guess we can say, back in the day, right? So Nietzsche had this idea. He said, well, the only solution, if you're an absurdist like Camus, or if you're a Christian who's like, oh my God, this life is so terrible, I'm pining away for another one. Nietzsche said, well, it's called the eternal return, a thought experiment, which means that what you just said is, if my life is going to be suffering, if it's going to be tumultuous, if it's going to be challenging, well, I have to stop worrying about it getting worse or how bad is it. I have to start embracing it. This is what I think makes Jesus so special. Because if you read in the Old Testament, like I mentioned earlier, Genesis chapter 8 talks about this new covenant that God made with Noah. But then later, God reminds us in Leviticus that we're meant to love. It's called the Shema prayer, and you're supposed to pray that every day as a Jew. It reminds you that everything is God-given, right? You're supposed to love God with all of your body and soul, but I don't think they were clear enough in that, because then separately in Deuteronomy, the commandment is to love yourself as you love your neighbor. And I think that's what makes Jesus so special, is he said, those are the same thing. Remember when he was asked, and he combines them. Right?
Yeah.
Because they are the same thing. And that's what I think Nietzsche was getting at. When we deny this world for another, well, we're denying what's the gift from God. And that denatures our very humanity. And I argue that's our way through, right? Is to embrace the weal and the woe, right? And I don't know. What do you guys think? Prepare for the worst, but expect the best. That's my motto growing up on a military base. Yeah. Right. Well, I saw the worst, right? Yeah.
I wouldn't know. Christ highlighted the most difficult commandments.
Yeah.
That's why we always fail. It's like how to love my neighbor.
Oh, ourselves.
I can love my neighbor if he's the nicest guy in the world and he's the coolest guy. And man, I come around and he says, "Let me mow your lawn," and I'm like, I love this guy. But if he's an asshole, but Christ doesn't say, love your neighbor if he's a nice guy. He says, love your neighbor.
I go so far as to say, I think the hardest for us to love, because what Jung said, what we hate in others is what we hate in ourselves, or what we dislike in others. I'm being bombastic. But I think the stranger is even harder than your neighbor. Your neighbor is someone you share some weal and woe with. But imagine how we do this. Like, we will think the worst of people. You know what I mean? So if you see a stranger, you're going to make a ton of judgments. And so I think the hardest person besides ourselves to love is the stranger, even harder than the neighbor. What do you guys think?
Okay, I could rant on about that for a while.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I'm always looking at this stuff because basically it's because I'm concerned about. So the other thing that made me kind of put this plan in place is because God, in His wisdom, gave me daughters, which made me immediately become much more concerned about
the state of the world,
about the young men that are struggling in this world. And so, I've kind of been looking at this, like all the stuff about dating, and all the people with the evolutionary psychology.
Can I just quickly interrupt?
Yes.
I didn't give a shit about politics until I became a father.
No kidding.
Well, yeah, they really make you take a look at the world you're living in. I mean, that's the thing, So, and that's honestly even just what I say. Like, when we encourage people to have kids, just because it was the normal thing to do, it did in some sense force them to be more concerned about the world in which we live. But if you're just an individual and you're the end of the line who's taking all the advantages that your parents have given you and are not passing them on, then it's just use it up. But what I was thinking about was, I was looking at this thing and like I was actually learning about like what do you call it, like oxytocin versus like which is like that, that's like
it's the bonding
thing,
hormone.
But it's also weirdly the thing that it strengthens that in-group, out-group preference.
I call it the anti-tribalism hormone, is what I call it.
Well, it is the tribalism. Well, yeah.
But I'll explain another time if you want. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Well, so I was kind of thinking about it and like thinking about like culturally and like looking even like at the advice that Christians sometimes give and stuff, and like, and this makes sense in like a practical wisdom term is like, marry somebody that is somebody that that's family is similar to yours, that has the same values, somebody from your community. And it's like, okay, that's smart for a lot of reasons, but that's like so something is like that's like the oxytocin dating proposal or whatever, and because things are going to work, things are going to be easy, it's going to work together, you're not going to have a lot of strife. But then there and basically it's just all out and out condemning the kind of more romantic, attraction of opposites thing, which really the evolutionary psychologists or whatever are saying like there is even this genetic component where it's like, you find you don't see it but it's on a genetic level. It's like your genes recognize something about them and their immune system and what they have that's
pheromones,
corrective even to the particular limitations of your own tribe. Because once you go too much,
smell is a big thing here as well.
Yeah, because if you go too much into the tribal thing, you're gonna get into incest, or inbreeding, and you just get more of a prevalence of those things. And so it's like it's that romantic like star-crossed lovers thing,
you're not wrong. Romeo and Juliet were exactly that. Two families that were against each other.
And so
sorry, Michael. One of the Pajot brothers was talking about too close and too far.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of whichever one of them said that.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, well, and because of that, it's like maybe you tell the girls that are going crazy, like, lower your standards with that whole, like, because that's the whole thing. They all want a guy that's 6'5" and makes $1 billion,
Like 5
and
guys that fit that.
yeah,
in the country,
the whatever. And it's like, so okay, you guys that are going, it's like, first of all, look in the mirror, and then
yeah, no, don't
lower
be
your
mean.
standards. So
Yeah.
lower your standards a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
My wife, I met my wife and we married after like a week or something.
Really?
Her prayer to God was, one of them was, dear Lord, let me be open. Whatever he looks like, just let me be open to the man that is most suited to me.
That's perfect. The open mind again.
Women should also pay attention. Like, this prayer thing works. My wife's prayer was that she would be friends with the person that she married for like 5 years or something, which is basically how it worked out. She liked me right away.
Have you done the 5 years now and you're not friends? How does that work?
Well, she
I'm twisting your
words. She liked me right away. I could tell that freaked me out because I didn't want to lead her on, because I'd been in the bad zone, the bad end of the friend zone thing too many times, and I didn't want to do that to her. So then she thought I hated her. Some of this is also the autism thing. It still continues. I keep telling her, listen to the words that I say. Forget the tone of voice thing. I don't know what tone of voice I'm using.
Yeah.
But
I believe that's common nowadays. People don't understand body language because they're interacting on Zoom. Because I saw that as a banker, right? I actually put myself. I said through as a trade, but I actually sold things on the phone to put myself through high school, and so I learned that there's different types of sales. So I was kind of the inverse. A lot of people I found coming into, because I started training people when I was young. Like, I put myself through high school, eventually training people how to do telemarketing. And I found that people had to learn how to recognize what people were saying over the phone, because most people aren't like us, are either dyslexic or autistic, whatever you want to call it, that don't recognize people's subtle, what would you call it?
Nonverbal
Signals.
communication.
Yes, 80% of it's nonverbal. But what you don't realize is, if you're open and sensitive enough, you'll notice that people give different types of clues on the phone. So we just have to be open to these different types of clues. But I argue, fast forward to today, most of our people are so disengaged that they're going to have to relearn this stuff all over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Relating.
Everyone has to relearn everything over again.
Yeah, you ain't wrong. Yeah.
So that's how it worked. And then it was great because my wife and I were basically, after she stopped hating me and we kind of became friends, we worked together and we had a great relationship where neither of us were thinking about any of that stuff.
You're just friends. And
then it was when her mom passed away, which was very sad. But I realized how much I cared about her. And the other helpful thing, because I was always like, that girl is the hottest one, so that is the one to focus on. Like,
you were thinking of other qualities.
And so I was going too much for the other thing. And then and I was always like just chasing girls that weren't really interested in me, or they were interested in me as a friend, but not in that way. And then my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, one day said, like, after one of these bad things kind of fizzled out, she's like, why don't you try going after a girl that likes you? And then I remembered, I'm like, oh, well, Mandy liked me way back when. Like, she really seemed to have a crush on me or whatever. And then it was there was a whole bunch of signs and things. And then one day I asked her out on a date, and by the second date, it's like, we knew we were going to get married. So it was lucky. So it all worked out. But that was the thing. So I had to bring my range a little closer. There's plenty of difference between my wife and I to navigate, but at least we are like in the same world. So it works out. But then as you think about that with that too far and too close thing, it's like, maybe if the people are so conservative, it's like, maybe go find a girl in the next village over, or 2 villages over or whatever, you know, and it's like, you know, that's you do have to have something of that, or that's the only thing that's like sustainable. Otherwise, you get into the tribes that are just too you know, too much
But the
animosity.
tribes stealing each other's women, which
Yeah,
makes
well, and
logical
that's
sense. It's like not
that's
too
the way
close.
that's the way they introduce those opposite those unfamiliar genes that they need, is
Yeah.
by sowing their seed abroad or taking them back with them.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
taking them
currently
back home.
reading "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee," and it goes all into that idea of borrowing women and children from other tribes,
Borrowing.
borrowing them, yeah, because it was a back and forth, right? Yeah.
But it has logical consistency.
Oh, beautiful! It's when you're a tiny tribe. Like honestly, what is it? It's if you start marrying even like your 5th cousin, it raises the likelihood of some sort of genetic issue of like 400%. Right? So yeah.
400.
400%. Yeah, it's incredible. But that's all different diseases, right? Like you got to remember that if you're we're not just talking about incest, but if you're too closely related, then you could pass on 2 recessive genes for a really bad disease, you know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's all of those laws, you know, those prohibitions in Leviticus that
Yeah.
God gives, and
Had
he
to
says, and he's saying, do not do these things that the Egyptians and the Canaanites do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
and they have a history of that.
and
Tutankhamun and his sister were interbred. They believe they had hemophilia.
yeah, and then you know, it's worked out civilizationally, you know, those prohibitions where
How did we get onto this?
I don't know. That's just how
Don't
it
sleep
goes.
with his sister.
Well, it's because, like, okay, I say this because we need to reach out to the secular people, because I don't believe they're actually against religion or God or faith or even just believing in something like AA, right? AA just asks you to believe in something greater than yourself. That's all you need. And I believe why we have so many people, it's because it's what Emerson said and Whitman said and Nietzsche said. It's always, are you with us or against us? Instead of saying, join us, come and see. As didn't Christ say that? Come and see. So come even before you've been given the gift of faith. And personally, I think that's how we got to this idea, is that if you look at a secular reason why we have religion, faith, or shared beliefs, myth, if you want to call it even, it's because that keeps society together. We're sharing, what would you call it? The shared myth is what keeps us together. I mean, and I argue that's the beauty of the Western identity, is because we're saying you can come from all over the place, speak another language, have another culture, but we come together and we're sharing the weal and woe together because we all believe that we're this third identity, American or Canadian. And in this case, this is like Christian. Or I argue, as the Buddhists, they've opened it up to say that the Buddhist Sangha isn't just people who are fellow Buddhists, but even people who are on the fringe, right? Noahide people, say, for example, right? Like people who are looking for a group of people who may not think alike, but at least you guys believe. That's what I meant by the oxytocin. So when I say anti-tribal hormone, what I mean by that is, so instead of you seeing someone
That's such a great phrase.
Yeah, but instead of oxytocin, instead of you seeing someone and going, they're different, oxytocin says, no, hey, we're together. The example I give is 30 years ago when they first started studying oxytocin, they thought it was the bonding between child and mother. But the example I give now is they've studied it. If you're driving around town and someone cuts you off, at first you're going to be very tribal and go, how dare you? But if you see they have a bumper sticker of something you share.
I'd use a more colorful language.
Exactly. But if you see that you share something in common, the oxytocin floods, and all of a sudden it is the anti-tribal hormone, right? So instead of, and there's 2 ways, of course, linguistic relativity. Do you mean tribalism as we all share the weal and woe, or do you mean my tribe, your tribe? I'm talking that separation, which is what we fail at. Almost every faith teaches we all break down when we start to see as us better than another. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's how.
Yeah. So I mean, so that because there has to be that shared element.
Yep.
Which is it's like the problem with any worldview that views some category of humans as subhuman or non-human, then
It's terrible.
then you get the scapegoat thing, and it's, you know, that's the whole terrible thing. So it's like, yeah, that is the most important thing. And man, heck, I mean, yeah, Christians have not been have been just as guilty of that as any other group, I would say. But
well, I mean, recently, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just quickly to share is I think Christians fail a lot when they talk about the homosexuality or the alternative lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
See, me, I'd be quite open about it and say, hey, I don't hate anybody, even if they aren't acting. And that's where recently Jordan Peterson or even Piers Morgan, they failed to talk about that. No, we don't hate the homosexual. We just hate the acts. And I would go so far as we don't even have to hate the act. If you look at 1 Timothy 8-11, if what they're doing, same as intoxication, as you said, Mark. So I don't believe that alcohol is denaturing us. It is when it actually has you walk against the path or veer from the path. So I would argue that we could say that, well, homosexuality, and a lot of churches will say this, that as long as you're not a non-acting homosexual, you're still welcome and loved as a Christian. I might go one step further and say, if you fit into 1 Timothy's 8-11, where you're not an abuser, you're not a horrible person, if you're still sharing the wheel of woe of life, if you're Deuteronomy 5:29, if you aren't begetting children, but you are helping establish the community and the society that will allow these children to grow and flourish, I argue that fits into sound doctrine. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, well,
What do you mean? Can I?
Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to throw something extremely.
Well, you know,
No,
it's usually that's just one of those ones where, because there's a separate, like, you know, I'd say like the born this way or whatever kind of thing. You know, it takes it from people. Like, we can't have the discussions about, okay, well, that's an extreme. It is an extreme in a sense of like, you're trying that, and we know this from data that we choose to ignore, that it very often that behavior is a extreme overcompensation for a lack of love from
Trauma
some other,
response.
you know, from the parent of the same sex or the opposite sex, or some abuse, or, you know, and we don't, but we, like, culture doesn't want to have that discussion. It's just, which is, you know, is just saying just accept it is
Yes,
just as bad as
I
saying
think so.
just reject it if we
No,
can't talk about it.
Hey, Chad.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
Chad
feel
the
guilty bringing up a
Builder.
little baby. That's awesome.
How's it going,
I
guys?
have to clean up my language now because I was
Oh,
about to go full
I
Gen
never
X.
thought of that. No.
I have an earbud in, so it's all good.
Oh, okay, good.
Hi, Bear.
You might want to mute this. The basic problem, as I see it, and this is me going full Gen X.
It's all our opinion, yeah.
Let me just shut the door.
Oh, this is gonna be spicy.
Yeah.
It's shut. The
Well,
basic problem is men will fuck anything.
yeah, that's so true.
including a goldfish given the opportunity. And if that happens, the
I hope
human race disappears. So
Yep.
our wiser ancestors have said, well, we need to make some kind of rules to say this is bad, this is good.
I like that.
And I think it's basically
I'll push
basic
back.
human nature. It's
I'll
like,
push
you
back
can't
on that,
anything,
though.
men, but don't do it.
Yes.
I'm gonna push back on
And
that.
it's
I'm gonna
enough.
push it back on that, because I think
Okay.
that, and I think this is like, why do you the reason why you have like a feminist movement rise up is because we actually, I pointed at Freud. Essentially, Freud gave men a lot more permission to
Excuse me.
blame psychology and biology and a lot of things for some of those
Scapegoat.
drives than they deserve. And it even continues in the church. And I would even say, like, that's like the way that the churches teach young men how to deal with like lust and pornography and things like that.
Make them hate their body and their natural urges.
Yeah, well, and or it's like you're they don't even tell them that you can have self-control. They teach them you can't have self-control.
Exactly.
And that's
Good
why
point.
you have to reorient your life in such a way to make these things really difficult.
So you're never
to achieve.
tempted,
Because
right?
and by doing so, they keep elevating these things. They're giving them more power because they're saying those things are like so amazing and salient. If you see them, you're not going to be able to handle it. So you got to put all this stuff away. Like, whereas, and even those
Fetishizing
things,
it.
it's and
I don't see
and
how you're pushing back on me. You sound like you're agreeing.
because I'm saying that's all been taught. I'm saying that it's been taught, and even before, like
But that's my point.
It's but men won't fuck anything if they're told only fuck this one thing. Like that's what it's for.
No, but
like,
we have to be told. That's my point. We need a framework to say, this is
guidelines.
The goal.
Okay, but that's to say humans will do anything. And that's the thing. Humans will do anything if they're not given some kind of a framework.
So, like, what I think is a lot of I think what's kind of being left out, because I essentially agree with the idea that there's a degree of powerlessness that I'm going to be running up against as it relates to temptation and things like this. I will only be able to abstain from things that are desirable to me and harmful on my own with my own agency for so long. I think, and I think I have to be kind of nested inside of a power source that will be able to pick up the slack where I am unable to. And I think that's the emphasis that should be made. I think it's also kind of, this is a mistake that's made in AA circles too, where they just talk about like powerlessness as if like alcohol is some sort of big bad wolf that's like, you know, hanging out in the tall grass waiting for you. It's like, no, like I like alcohol. Like, no, I'm sorry, that's an understatement. Like I love alcohol and what it did for me. So, and it provides a particular kind of power. In other words, it connects it like a power source in that, like, it helps me feel connected. It does things for me that I can't do for myself. And that's what God is supposed to do. And essentially, I think that's what kind of, like what people find, like, if I could drink today, and get away with it, like, and not destroy my family, I would be doing it, right? Because like there's a tremendous power source there. But like I will only be able to just say no, like so long before um, before I just kind of collapse under the weight of my own desires. And so I don't know. I think that so I guess the question is, where does agency and um, and will converge? Like, where's the healthy point there? And because I think like talking about is good and all that stuff, but demonstrations, I think like this is why family is so important, where you get close to people. And what I don't want to do is scare people out of the ability to talk about the thing that's fucking them up the most. I think that's where a lot of the problems come from.
Mm-hmm.
I love
And
this guy.
because like the problems of like, oh, I can't talk about this. I can't talk about this. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with this, and I can't talk about this, and I can't. And now I'm under the spell of a different kind of power.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think where agency and um, humility and alignment, my will with God's will, I think where all that matches. There's no like hard line answer. It's not 1+1=2. It's bicycle plus airplane equals dog or some shit, some weird thing like that. But I'm gonna just listen.
Okay, can I quickly? So I need to walk the dog now. It's getting late. I'll just quickly say, when Moses came down from the mountain, he was fairly confident that all the Israelites were down with God and we're good and everything's going to be wonderful, and they're having a freaking orgy. So it's like, Go back up the mountain. Okay, here are the rules. We need some rules because people aren't bloody listening.
Yeah.
Let's put some rules
Even
in place.
Moses got frustrated with them not listening to him, and he had God and proof of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the worst.
Well, I mean, and that was the thing of that people were.
Okay, I
willing-
gotta go. I'll
Bye,
just
Mark.
mute
It was a
and
pleasure
hit
chatting
with you,
on
Mark.
and
It was
come
good to
back.
talk with you. Yeah, I mean, that was the.
This has been the best TLC chat I've ever had. Thank you,
Wow.
guys.
Thank you. I'm glad I came in here.
Just a spoon, yeah. Just a spoon.
I mean, yeah, that was the thing of like everybody got bored and they were like, wait, we're supposed to be starting a religion, right? And so then they were just like, what do we do? What happened at religion when we were back in Egypt? What did that look like? And they kind of start doing the thing. So, I mean, I think that there was already a connection there. But, and I missed a little of what Chad was saying because I was interrupted. But, I think like as far as I'll go back to talking about like with lust and stuff like that. Like there's a big problem where churches don't recognize that the appeal of pornography is not purely lust. It's because you are
dopamine.
well, and it's because you are seeing the image of God in its one of its most ultimate, I guess you'd say, is most glorified forms, the way as humans are made in the image of God. And like,
Yeah, but not only that is it's matches. It meets you where you are. Like
yeah,
It's easy. You mean, right?
well, not only that, but like not. I can find nihilism deeply attractive because I have a nihilistic bent within me. So it
It's
meets me
feeding
where I
into your
am.
darkest stuff.
and so
Well, it makes me feel that. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
But
Sorry.
because they fail to recognize the good thing that's in there that you're attracted to, and they absolutize it as a bad thing. I mean, like that's even the thing with drugs or whatever. It's like drugs make your brain do chemicals that make you happy. Well, who made our brains get high on
what made us susceptible to that?
God put that system in there. And so then it's like okay, so your willpower is not capable of just resisting on its own.
Good point. That was what Chad was talking about. Where does willpower end, and you need to ask for something more.
So here's the thing. So we kind of understand that we can't direct it towards the thing, so we direct it towards the environment, which is what we are designed to do. That's what God's command to humans was to. The creation.
Use everything I give you
to rule over the earth and to have dominion is to control the environment. But we do it as like make a weird Rube Goldberg machine that slaps you out of head in every time you attempt to do the wrong thing, instead of looking at the wider environment of your whole life and being, what is it about my life that's lacking so much that I'm so susceptible to these temptations? Where it says, if you have a healthier community and friendships and your work is meaningful and it serves a purpose and all these things, then the temptations go less. And that's even the thing, it's like even know with like the willpower and the decision making, it's like you are when you wake up in the morning, you have a certain reserve of will and decision making but once when something bad happens halfway through the day and then somebody says something mean or whatever and it's late at night and you can't sleep and whatever, you're in a bad spot, and your ability to do your ability to avoid the thing that is going to deliver that hit of dopamine that you're desperately seeking, even though that there's going to be terrible consequences afterwards, you can't resist that. So
even
you need
to get enough sleep. They studied you're more likely to do the wrong thing, the bad thing.
Yeah, but there's just something to be said about like people. There are people who don't have trauma growing up. They don't have like genetic ties to alcoholism, and yet they'll still will like land themselves into a life where they deal with alcoholism. They suffer from alcoholism, and so like it's tricky because like we know very little about brain science. Now, just imagine how if we know that little about brain science and brain chemistry, imagine how little we know about spiritual
Oh,
realities. And so,
nothing.
I just think, like, when I think of Job is kind of a nice little example too, because like he's doing all the right things and yet he still suffers
Yeah,
immensely.
everything will
And
go, and everyone turned against him.
yeah, so it's like it's sometimes I think this is what I've been kind of toying with an idea lately of I was toying with maybe the idea of despair, but I think it's more like maybe discontent or I can just go right down and just say powerless. But I think the idea is I wonder if like discontentedness is the default. So when the whole
Mm.
he has placed eternity in our hearts. That
Yep.
Mhm.
is the idea that like hopelessness, um, lack of answers is the default, and like and that even again, it's not. I don't think reality plays out always 1 + 1 = 2.
No.
Sometimes I can be doing all the right stuff and still wake up in the morning and think, like I just feel like ending it. Like I don't know why that is. Maybe that's a mental health issue, but I just think like,
I think that's normal.
yeah, I think there's a level of or normality um, to dealing with the complexities of life,
Yeah.
and it is what it is, and
Yep.
so yeah, if you're like seeking God and constantly doing the prayer stuff and all the things that like your spiritual advisors are giving you, and you still run up against discontent and like anger and stuff. It's like, yeah, welcome to the fucking club. Like
Yes. Yeah.
it's okay, dude. It's
Yep.
fine. Like we just continue to seek,
Yep.
keep seeking, keep serving. Uh, and there's no simple answer for any of us. The simple answer is probably really devastating, to be honest.
Oh. Well, what? Tell me if this doesn't say it. There's a cliche Buddhist idea of before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Well, I would prefer to teach that, and Saint John of the Cross would agree. Mother Teresa would agree. Even Thomas Merton.
Hmm.
Um, it's chop wood, carry water. When do I reach enlightenment? Shut up, chop wood, carry water. Do you get what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
yeah,
attainment. You know what I mean? Like, it's Brother Lawrence practicing the presence of God, or Saint John of the Cross. Like, when you feel most disconnected from Source, from God, that's when you're
mhm,
actually starting to figure it out. You get what I mean? That's
yeah,
that dark night of the soul of Saint John. It's actually obscure night of the soul, because I love that word obscure, because you feel lost, as Nietzsche said. If you're treading your true destined path, then you're going to feel uncomfortable because it's going to be unknown. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that resonates. That idea of just keep chopping wood and carrying water. Don't ask about when you're going to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
Well,
can ask, but
yeah.
Yeah,
don't
but don't
expect an
expect an answer.
answer.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's what we were talking about before you got here. Like, I love that idea of sitting with the questions, because once you get an answer, then you're going to have another question. Like, it's a never ending cycle. Like rich people, they just keep trying to get richer instead of loving what they have, right? Wanting what they have,
Hmm.
even. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I think parenthood is such a big thing, because you get something more than you ever could imagine. Am I not right? Like, you can
Yeah,
try to picture what a child is going to be like, but it will always be more, right?
I think that's one of the things that's really important about why God makes a command to honor the Sabbath, because
Pay
you
attention.
have to intentionally take rest when you can. And that's things like maybe you won't always be able to get that, but like, and I centered my book, the theme of it, because with its tense, is kind of about the Feast of Tabernacles, which it's like I don't know why Christians don't celebrate this feast, because it's a very it's a feast in anticipation of uh, like the future meeting of God and man. Passover is like the escape from Egypt, but then and tabernacles is like also you're intense because it's supposed to harken back to the time in the wilderness, but it's a different spirit because it's an anticipation of you're free and now you're with the one who loves you. It's actually a feast when it's like a honeymoon feast. It's when a lot of weddings take place in Israel and in Jewish communities, and that's the one where it's like Passover only for the circumcised. Tabernacles, you must invite the widows and the strangers and the orphans in your midst. And it's basically just eating. It's a harvest time feast. It's just, we're going to eat and do no work for like 7 days and have a party. And that's what I think should be like, that's the opportunity for evangelism, because that's when you take the people that aren't in your
Everyone's
community
together.
and you say, this is when we want you to come in and see what our way of life is all about. And then it's like once a week you have a
Come and
Sabbath
see.
that's a reminder of that. And because you can go down that whole like efficiency rabbit hole thing, and like the Sabbath is totally antithetical to that. But it's like when you see it, like, wait, we're commanded to not work, and you're and I think it's kind of like within that is like a celebration of a little bit of excess, a little bit of waste, not in a sinful way, but like I say it as like
Celebration of God's bounty.
yes, but also I think appreciating those rough edges or whatever, which is another thing. There's the untrimmed corners of the field, the
Yeah.
tassels that you
Save
don't
save it
cut,
for the poor and the widows. Yeah.
and it's kind of like, because we're not perfect, we're being perfected, and like being recognizing that, um, because I think, man, it's like God's way more gracious
Oh,
towards
yes.
us than often we are towards
Well, that's
ourselves.
the thing. I remind people that there's our goal is to come as close to embodying that idea of chesed in Hebrew. It's a
Yeah.
love with charity and a forgiveness. And in Greek, they had to use multiple words, right? Caritas is Augustine's favorite. Agape is another one. That's Vervaeke's favorite. But what I love is in English, we invented a word, loving kindness, because we didn't have something that encompassed both the loving and the kindness, right? And that's what we're meant. But I don't believe we can ever do it because, yeah, exactly. Chesed, Chesd. We can never achieve that, right? Because we're not God, right? And honestly, and here's where I get a little heretical. I believe that the cherubim is not guarding the way to the tree of life; he's lighting it, or they are lighting the tree of life, because that's when we can maybe achieve that. That's this idea of being as they would be as gods if not for the tree of life. And I believe that's it. When we bite from the apple, when we fully embrace our lot, our life, both our failings and our potential, I think that's when we truly get as close to embodying that love that forgives. And you get what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting in that way. Like, I don't know if it's saying, maybe you could say, yeah, lighting the way, at least in a reminder or aspect of, for those, for Adam and Eve who would have known what it was. Because like when you look at the story of Adam, when Eve is created, it says God, it's not good for the man to be alone. And there's no fall and there's no sin, but that's not good. There's good and not good. And God has Adam explore and name all of the animals. And so basically, he's done his job for the whole of creation and figured everything out. And he's done all that he can do as a man alone. And then God steps in and creates the woman and brings her to him. And now Adam has this context where he can recognize her for what she is, because he's already explored everything else. And so maybe being, seeing that thing, like that tree of life, um, they couldn't get back there until they finished the other task that they had, which is this creation mandate to fill the earth and
Yes, sir.
cultivate it
That's what I
and
mean.
plan
Exactly.
on it. Yeah.
Right. So the tree of life is them and their seed. Right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for the combo. I gotta go because she's kind of antsy, and
I think I've been doing this
awesome.
for
Well,
for a long time.
3.5
so,
hours,
yeah,
dude. You got the
yeah.
stamina of Job.
All right. Well,
thank you, Michael.
yeah,
Nice to meet you, Om.
Yeah, cheers.
Later.
on.
Yeah, we'll talk
All
again
right.
soon, I hope.
I'll leave. And it was good to talk to you, Al. Did you get that link downloaded there?
I did. I sent the request for you to allow me access to it, so I should get it in my email.
All right, I'll figure that out. If I can get that, but well, either way, if you have my email, or you can send me an email or whatever.
Yeah, I'll read your book because I'm crazy. I love reading stuff.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers
Have a
to
good
everybody
day.
that had the stamina to stay with us. But yeah, I do appreciate the chat, guys. And it's such you come up with such the best ideas. Y'all really do. So hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah. See ya.
Yeah. Ciao. Bye.